My husband's funeral took place on a freezing winter morning. Everyone said his death was simply a tragic accident. My two sons stood beside the coffin, calm in a way that made my stomach tighten, exchanging quiet glances with each other that I couldn't quite understand. I almost believed everything they said, but when the service ended, I noticed a strange envelope on the bench behind me. Inside was a small device and a short message written in my husband's handwriting. "If you're reading this, stop the cremation." In that moment, I knew something was terribly wrong. I truly appreciate you staying with me. Take a moment, comment, and share where you're watching from. It helps me know who's listening. Important reminder, some parts of this story are fictionalized to enhance the educational experience. Any overlap with actual names or settings is purely by chance. But the core lessons and message here absolutely valuable. December 17th, 2023. The day I buried my husband of 44 years. The chapel smelled of lilies and old wood, and I couldn't stop shaking. Riverside Chapel sat on a quiet street in West Asheville, its tall stained glass windows scattering pale winter light across the worn pews. I sat in the front row, hands folded in my lap, numb to everything, the organ music, the murmured condolences, the cold seeping through the stone walls. Tom lay in the casket 10 feet away, dressed in his navy suit, looking peaceful. Too peaceful. His skin had a strange rosy hue that didn't seem right. Ruth Palmer sat beside me, her hand resting on mine. Ruth had been my best friend for 30 years, a retired nurse with sharp eyes and a steady heart. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. But when she leaned close and whispered, "Martha, does Tom's skin look red to you?" I felt the first prickle of unease. "It's probably the makeup," I murmured back. She frowned but said nothing more. Across the aisle, my son sat in the second row. Brandon, my eldest at 40, looked every inch the successful insurance broker, expensive suit, polished shoes, a Rolex that gleamed every time he checked his phone, which he did, constantly. Even during his father's funeral, Kyle sat beside him, 38, thinner, quieter, with nervous hands that kept twisting his wedding ring. He managed marketing for some firm in Charlotte. He'd always followed Brandon's lead. That day, he looked lost. Vanessa, Brandon's wife, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, but her face was blank. Performative grief. Something was wrong with them. Brandon and Kyle kept glancing at each other, quick, furtive looks no one else seemed to notice. Brandon's jaw was tight. Kyle looked guilty. And neither of them cried. Not once. Before the service started, Brandon had pulled me aside. "Mom, I think we should keep the casket closed. Dad wouldn't want people staring." I'd stared at him confused. "People need to say goodbye." "Fine, but let's close it halfway through." His voice had been urgent, almost desperate. I hadn't had the strength to argue. And then there was the makeup. I'd overheard Brandon talking to the funeral director that morning. "I want him to look peaceful, rosy, like he's sleeping. Use extra cosmetics if you have to." Why would Brandon care about that? Near the back of the chapel, I noticed a man I didn't recognize. Maybe 50, graying hair, lean face. He wore a dark suit and stood quietly, but his eyes sharp. Watchful were fixed on Brandon and Kyle. He didn't approach the casket. He didn't offer condolences. He just watched. Something about him felt deliberate. The pastor finished his eulogy. People stood, sang a hymn I didn't hear. And then I felt it, something pressing against my thigh. I looked down. A white envelope sat on the pew beside me. I hadn't seen anyone put it there. The chapel was full of people, but I would have noticed someone leaning past me. Wouldn't I? My hands shook as I picked it up. No name, no markings, just a plain white envelope. I glanced around. Ruth was listening to the pastor. Brandon and Kyle were staring straight ahead. Vanessa was scrolling through her phone. I opened the envelope. Inside was a USB drive and a folded piece of paper. The handwriting made my breath catch. Tom's handwriting. "Martha, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and it wasn't an accident." I don't have time to explain everything here. Watch the USB. Everything you need to know is on it. Trust Marcus Reynolds. He'll help you. "I'm so sorry, my love. I tried to protect you. I tried to protect them. I love you. Tom." The words blurred. I read them again. It wasn't an accident. My heart hammered. I looked up at the casket, at Tom's too pink face, at Brandon standing stiffly beside it. Then I looked at the man in the back of the chapel. Marcus Reynolds. Tom had written his name. Tom had trusted him. I folded the letter quickly and shoved the envelope into my purse. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. Ruth glanced at me. "Martha, you okay?" I nodded, mute. I wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. The service ended in a blur. People filed past the casket, offering condolences I couldn't hear. I stayed seated, clutching my purse. Then Brandon and Kyle were standing in front of me. "Mom." Brandon said, his voice gentle but firm. "We need to talk about the cremation." I looked up slowly. Cremation? Dad wanted to be cremated. Kyle added quickly. "He told us." I didn't remember Tom ever saying that. "We've already scheduled it for tomorrow," Brandon continued. "You just need to sign the paperwork." Tomorrow. My voice sounded far away. It's what he wanted, Mom. Brandon's eyes were hard now. "We don't want to drag this out. Quick, clean." I stared at them, my sons, and felt nothing but cold dread. "I need time," I said finally. Brandon's jaw tightened. "Mom," I said, "I need time." He exhaled sharply, glanced at Kyle, then nodded curtly. "Fine, we'll talk tomorrow." They walked away. Ruth helped me to my feet. "Come on, honey, let's get you home." She drove me to Grove Park, to the house Tom and I had lived in for 40 years, the house where every corner smelled like sawdust and old books. She walked me to the door, squeezed my hand, and left. The house was silent. I stood in the entryway, still wearing my black dress, staring at the living room Tom had built with his own hands. I pulled the envelope from my purse, held it in both hands, felt the weight of the USB drive inside. It wasn't an accident. Trust Marcus Reynolds. I didn't know what was on that drive. I didn't know who Marcus Reynolds was. But I knew one thing. Tom had left me a message, and tomorrow Brandon and Kyle wanted to burn his body. I slipped the envelope into my purse. That night, alone in the house that felt too big and too quiet, I would finally know the truth, or at least the beginning of it. That night, alone in the house that felt too big and too quiet, I finally opened my laptop. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely insert the USB drive. Ruth had dropped me off an hour ago, lingering at the door with worried eyes. "You sure you don't want me to stay?" she'd asked. I'd lied and said I'd be fine. She'd squeezed my hand and left her taillights disappearing down Macon Avenue into the December dark. Now the house was silent except for the creak of old wood settling and the hum of the heater. I sat at Tom's desk in the corner of our bedroom, the desk he'd built 30 years ago, its surface scarred with pencil marks and coffee rings. The lamp cast a small circle of light. Beyond it, shadows swallowed everything. I plugged in the USB drive. My laptop chimed softly. 3 files appeared on the screen. The first was labeled, "For Martha," watchfirst.mp4. The second, evidence, financial fraud.pdf. The third, letter to attorney.pdf. I clicked on the video, held my breath. Tom's face filled the screen. He was sitting in his workshop. I recognized the wall behind him, the pegboard lined with chisels and clamps, the window that looked out onto the dogwoods. But the light was wrong. Dim. Late evening, maybe. His face looked haggard, older than I remembered. There were shadows under his eyes. He stared into the camera for a long moment as if gathering courage. Then he spoke. "Martha." His voice cracked. "If you're watching this, something happened to me, and I need you to know it wasn't an accident." My heart stopped. "Brandon and Kyle," he paused, rubbed his face with both hands. "God, I don't even know how to say this. I found out they've been stealing from me for years. They forged my signature on loan documents. They withdrew money from my retirement account without my permission. They even tried to change my will." He looked directly into the camera, his eyes red-rimmed. "I hired a private investigator 6 months ago, Marcus Reynolds. He's good, Martha. He's honest. He found proof. Over $200,000 gone. Brandon took most of it, gambling, debts, bad investments, I don't know. Kyle helped cover it up." Tom's voice broke. He looked away, blinking hard. "I wanted to believe they'd change. I thought if I confronted them, gave them a chance to pay it back, maybe we could fix this as a family. I was going to talk to them on December 16th. Give them an ultimatum. If they refused, I was going to file charges on the 18th. I have an appointment with my lawyer, William Harper, that day." He paused, swallowed. But if I'm dead before the 18th Martha, if you're watching this, then they didn't give me the chance. Tears streamed down his face now. He didn't wipe them away. Marcus has more evidence. Trust him. He'll help you. I gave him instructions. If anything happens to me, he's supposed to give you this USB at the funeral. He's a good man. Tom leaned forward, his voice urgent now. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could save our boys, but I was wrong. And if they did something to me, Martha, you have to go to the police. You have to finish what I started. His face crumpled. He covered it with his hands, shoulders shaking. I love you, he whispered. I love you so much. I tried to protect you. I tried to protect them, but I failed. I'm so sorry. The screen went black. I sat frozen, staring at the empty screen. My face was wet. I hadn't realized I was crying. Brandon and Kyle had been stealing from him for years, and Tom thought they'd killed him. No, not thought, knew. My hands shook as I opened the second file. Page after page of scanned documents filled the screen. Bank statements, loan applications with Tom's forged signature. Withdrawal slips from his retirement account, $85,000 taken out in 3 separate transactions in 2020. A will amendment dated 2022 that changed the beneficiaries from me to Brandon and Kyle, splitting everything 50-50. Tom's real signature was at the bottom of our original will, written in 1995. I'd seen it 1,000 times, neat careful with a distinctive loop on the capital B in Bennett. The signature on the fraudulent documents was different, sloppier. The B was wrong. Brandon had forged it, badly. I kept scrolling. There were handwriting analysis reports, comparisons, timestamps. Marcus Reynolds had been thorough. There was no doubt. My sons were thieves. I opened the third file. It was a letter Tom had written to his attorney, William Harper. Dear Bill, I'm writing to confirm our appointment on December 18th, 2023 at 10 a.m. I need to discuss filing criminal charges against my sons Brandon and Kyle Bennett for fraud and embezzlement. I've attached copies of all evidence gathered by Marcus Reynolds, the private investigator I hired. The total amount stolen is approximately $235,000. I will be seeking full restitution and criminal prosecution. I don't take this decision lightly. They are my sons, but they have left me no choice. Please have the necessary paperwork ready. I will sign everything on the 18th. Sincerely, Thomas Bennett. The letter was dated December 14th, 2023, 3 days before he died. Tom had been planning to destroy them, to send his own sons to prison. And they'd known. Somehow they'd known. I closed the laptop, sat in the dark. The house creaked around me, settling into the cold. Tom's voice echoed in my head. It wasn't an accident. Brandon and Kyle had stood beside his casket that morning, dry-eyed and calm. They'd insisted on cremation. They'd wanted to burn the evidence. I thought about the makeup, the too pink skin. Ruth's whispered question, does Tom's skin look red to you? What had they done to him? I opened the laptop again, watched the video a second time, and a third. Tom's face, his tears, his broken voice. I tried to save our boys. By the time the sun rose over the Blue Ridge Mountains, I hadn't slept. My eyes were swollen, my throat raw. But something had hardened inside me. Tom had tried to protect them, and they'd killed him for it. I wouldn't make the same mistake. I would find Marcus Reynolds. I would finish what Tom started, and I would make sure my sons paid for what they'd done. Tom's voice on that video haunted me, but it also gave me strength. The next 2 days would test me in ways I never imagined. The next 2 days felt like living in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. Brandon and Kyle became strangers wearing my sons' faces. I hadn't slept after watching Tom's video. By the time the sun rose on December 18th, I'd made coffee, showered, and dressed in the same black sweater I'd worn to the funeral. My eyes were swollen, my hands unsteady, but I forced myself to eat toast I couldn't taste. I had to look normal. Grieving, yes, but not suspicious. I knew Brandon and Kyle would come, and at 9 o'clock Monday morning they did. I heard their cars pull into the driveway, Brandon's sleek Audi, Kyle's dusty Honda. Through the kitchen window, I watched them get out, exchange a glance, and walk toward the front door in lockstep. I opened it before they could knock. Mom. Brandon stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. He was dressed for work, charcoal suit-polished shoes, but his jaw was tight, his movements brisk. Kyle followed quieter, his eyes darting around the living room like he was cataloging everything. "Boys," I kept my voice steady, "I wasn't expecting you so early." "We need to talk," Brandon said. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and set it on the kitchen table. "About Dad's cremation." I stayed standing. "What about it?" "We've scheduled it for this afternoon." He opened the folder, revealing a stack of papers. "You just need to sign here and here. It's all arranged." I stared at him. "This afternoon, Brandon, It's what Dad wanted, Mom." Kyle's voice was softer, almost pleading. "He told us. Remember?" I didn't remember. Tom had never said anything about cremation. In fact, years ago, we'd talked about being buried side by side in the cemetery on Tunnel Road under the oak trees. "I don't recall him ever saying that," I said slowly. Brandon's eyes flashed. "Well, he did, and we don't want to drag this out. It's better this way, quick clean. You'll have closure." Closure. The word tasted bitter. I looked down at the papers. Authorization for cremation, release of remains, my signature line blank and waiting. If I signed, Tom's body would burn. Any evidence, any proof of what they'd done would be ash. "I need time," I said. Brandon's jaw clenched. "Mom, we're trying to help you." I said I need time. Silence. Kyle shifted uncomfortably. Brandon stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then he sighed, closed the folder, and slid it back into his briefcase. "Fine," he said curtly. "But we can't wait forever. The funeral home needs an answer by Wednesday." "I'll let you know," I said. Brandon nodded once, then glanced around the living room at the furniture Tom had built, the shelves lined with books, the photographs on the mantel. "You know, Mom, this house is too big for you now. You're 66. Living alone in a place this size, it's not safe." I blinked. "What?" "Kyle and I have been talking." Brandon continued, his tone suddenly gentle, almost patronizing. "We think you should move into a senior living community, assisted living, somewhere with staff activities, people your age. You'd be so much more comfortable. And we could sell the house," Kyle added quickly, "and Dad's workshop. Use the money to pay for your care. You wouldn't have to worry about anything." My chest tightened. They wanted to sell the house. Tom's house? The house he'd built with his own hands. The house where all the evidence was hidden. "I'm not moving," I said flatly. Brandon's expression hardened. "Mom, be reasonable." I said I'm not moving. Another silence. Brandon and Kyle exchanged a look, quick-loaded with meaning I couldn't decipher. "Okay," Brandon said finally. "We'll talk about it later. But there's something else. Dad's workshop, we need to go through it. Clear out the tools, the materials. It's a mess in there." "I was planning to do that myself," I said. "I want to—" "No." Brandon's voice was sharp. "Mom, that workshop is full of dangerous equipment. Power tools, chemicals, God knows what else. You could get hurt. Let us handle it." "I'm not a child, Brandon." "We're not saying you are," Kyle said quickly. We don't want you getting upset. There are a lot of memories in there. It's better if we take care of it." Translation. They didn't want me finding anything. "I'll think about it," I said. Brandon opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked like he wanted to argue, but Kyle touched his arm, a silent warning. "Fine," Brandon said again. He pulled out his phone, checked the time. "I have to get back to Charlotte. Kyle, you coming?" Kyle nodded. But before they left, he turned to me, his expression almost apologetic. "Mom, one more thing. Do you know where Dad kept his financial documents? Life insurance policies, bank account info, that kind of thing." I kept my face blank. "Your father handled all that. I assume it's with the lawyer." "Which lawyer?" "I'll have to check. I don't remember his name off the top of my head." Kyle hesitated. "What about a safe deposit box? Did he have one?" "I don't know." It was a lie. I knew exactly where Tom kept everything. But I wasn't about to tell them that. Kyle nodded slowly, clearly unsatisfied. "Okay, well, if you find anything, let us know." They left. I watched through the window as they stood beside Brandon's car, talking in low voices. Brandon gestured sharply. Kyle shook his head. Then they both got in their cars and drove away. I locked the door, leaned against it, exhaled. They were panicking. They knew Tom had been planning to prosecute them. They knew there was evidence somewhere, and they were scrambling to find it or destroy it before anyone else did. The next afternoon, Ruth showed up at my door with a casserole and a worried frown. "Chicken and rice," she said, handing me the dish. "You need to eat Martha." I let her in. We sat at the kitchen table and I told her everything: the cremation, the house, the workshop, the questions about finances. I didn't mention the USB, not yet. Ruth listened, her expression darkening with every word. "Martha," she said finally, her voice low and urgent. "Something's not right. Brandon and Kyle are pushing too hard, too fast. It's like they're trying to, I don't know, erase Tom." "I know. Don't sign anything," Ruth said firmly. "Not the cremation papers, not the house, nothing. Not until you talk to a lawyer, a real one. Not whoever they suggest." "I won't." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Promise me you'll be careful." "I promise." After Ruth left, I sat alone in the growing darkness. Outside, the mountains were silhouettes against the winter sky. Inside, the house was silent except for the ticking of the clock Tom had carved from walnut wood. I thought about my sons, the way they'd stood in my kitchen demanding I sign away Tom's body, the way they'd tried to keep me out of the workshop, the way they'd asked about the safe deposit box. They were guilty, and they knew I was a threat. I just had to prove it. That night at 11:47 p.m., my laptop chimed. New email, subject from Marcus Reynolds. "We need to talk." My heart pounded. I opened it. "Mrs. Bennett, I'm sorry for your loss. Your husband was a good man. I know you found the USB. Tom told me he'd leave it for you at the funeral. We need to meet. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Asheville Coffee House on Main Street. Come alone. Trust no one else, not even your sons. Marcus Reynolds." I read it 3 times. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Finally, I would get answers. Marcus Reynolds' email arrived at 11:47 p.m. on December 19th. He wanted to meet the next day, 3 p.m. public place, come alone. I barely slept. I spent the morning pacing the house, replaying Tom's video in my mind. Trust Marcus Reynolds. Tom wouldn't have said that unless he was certain. But I'd never met the man. For all I knew, he could be anyone. By 2:30, I'd changed clothes 3 times and checked the address twice. Asheville Coffee House on Main Street, a little place, downtown, brick walls and local art. The kind of spot where tourists sipped lattes and locals talked too loud. Public. Safe. I didn't tell Ruth where I was going. I didn't tell anyone. At 5 minutes to 3, I walked through the coffee shop door. The smell of roasted beans and cinnamon hit me immediately. A barista called out orders behind the counter. A couple sat by the window laughing. Christmas music played softly overhead. And at a corner table in the back, a man in a dark suit was watching me. Marcus Reynolds. He stood when I approached, tall, maybe 6 feet, with graying hair and a lean, weathered face that looked like it had seen too much. He wore a simple navy suit, no tie, and his eyes were sharp and assessing. Not unkind, but watchful. The eyes of someone who noticed everything. "Mrs. Bennett." He extended a hand. His grip was firm, steady. "Thank you for coming." I sat across from him, my purse clutched in my lap. "You're Marcus Reynolds." "I am." He sat back down, folding his hands on the table. "I was a detective with the Asheville Police Department for 23 years, retired 5 years ago. Now I work private investigations." His voice was quiet, deliberate. Southern but not thick, softened by years of courtroom testimony and careful speech. "Tom hired you," I said. 6 months ago." Marcus pulled a slim folder from the briefcase beside his chair. "Your husband suspected his sons were stealing from him. He asked me to find proof. I did." He opened the folder. Inside were printed documents, photographs, receipts. My chest tightened. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Mrs. Bennett," Marcus said, and I believed him. "Your husband was a good man. He didn't want to believe his sons were capable of this. But the evidence doesn't lie." I swallowed. "What evidence?" Marcus slid a single sheet across the table. "Audio recordings. Tom asked me to plant a listening device in Brandon's car back in October. It's legal in North Carolina, one-party consent." Tom consented. I stared at the transcript. October 14th, 2023, 8:47 p.m. Brandon Bennett and Kyle Bennett recorded in Brandon's vehicle. Brandon, we need to deal with this, now, before he finds the lawyer. Kyle, what if he doesn't? What if he's bluffing? Brandon, he's not bluffing. I saw the paperwork on his desk. He's going to prosecute us, Kyle. We'll go to prison. Kyle, Jesus, what do we do? Brandon, we handle it, like we should have 2 years ago. Kyle, Brandon, don't want to lose everything, because that's what's going to happen if we don't act. He's meeting with the lawyer on the 18th. We have until then. Long pause. Kyle, okay, what's the plan? The words blurred. I read them again, my hands shaking. They knew, I whispered. They knew Tom was going to prosecute them. Yes, ma'am. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. And they knew they had a narrow window to stop him. He pulled out another document. This is the financial fraud timeline. Your husband and I documented everything. Forged loan in 2018, $150,000. Embezzlement from his retirement account in 2020, $85,000. Fraudulent will amendment in 2022. Total approximately $235,000. I'd seen these on the USB, but hearing Marcus say it out loud in this coffee shop with Christmas music playing made it real in a way it hadn't been before. There's something else, Marcus said quietly. He pulled out an old police report yellowed at the edges. November 2021, your husband was nearly killed by carbon monoxide poisoning in his workshop. My breath caught. What? The report says it was accidental, a faulty heater. But Tom told me 2 months ago that Brandon had offered to repair that heater the week before. Insisted on doing it himself. Said he wanted to help his old man out. I stared at Marcus. You think Brandon tried to kill him then? I think Brandon ran a test, Marcus said. And when it didn't work when your husband survived, Brandon learned what went wrong. He spent 2 years planning to get it right the second time. My stomach twisted. Oh my God. Tom didn't realize it until recently. Marcus continued. When I showed him the fraud evidence, he started connecting dots. The heater incident. The way Brandon kept asking about his schedule, his routines. Tom knew he was in danger. That's why he made the video. That's why he hired me to create a Plan B. Plan B, I repeated. Marcus leaned forward. Tom told me, if something happens to me before December 18th, Marcus, you'll know it wasn't an accident. Give Martha the USB. Help her find justice. No, those were his exact words. My throat tightened. I blinked hard, refusing to cry in front of this man I barely knew, Mrs. Bennett. Marcus said gently, your husband loved you. He tried to protect you. He tried to protect his sons too, right up until the end, but they didn't give him the chance. I looked down at my hands. What do we do now? We gather more evidence, Marcus said. The recordings and financial documents are good, but they're not enough for a murder charge. We need forensic proof. We need to examine Tom's body before it's cremated, and we need to connect Brandon directly to the heater. Brandon's trying to cremate him tomorrow, I said quickly. He keeps pushing me to sign the papers. Marcus's jaw tightened. Don't sign anything, stall them, tell them you're not ready. Can you do that? I nodded. Good. He pulled a business card from his pocket and slid it across the table. This is Detective Sarah Mitchell, Asheville PD Homicide Division. She's an old colleague of mine. I trust her. When we have enough evidence, we'll take it to her. But not yet. Right now, Brandon and Kyle think they're safe. Let's keep it that way. What about the workshop? I asked. Brandon won't let me near it. He says it's dangerous. Marcus's expression darkened. Because he doesn't want you finding evidence. I'll check it out tonight, quietly. If he sabotaged that heater, there'll be traces. Be careful, I said. If they find out you're investigating, they won't. Marcus's voice was calm, confident. I've done this a long time, Mrs. Bennett. Your husband trusted me. I hope you will too. I looked at him, the stranger who'd been watching my family for months, gathering evidence, waiting for the moment when everything would fall apart. I do, I said. Marcus nodded. One more thing. Don't confront Brandon or Kyle. Don't let them know you suspect anything. Play the grieving widow. Be fragile. Let them think they're in control. I can do that. I know you can. He stood, extending his hand again. I'll be in touch. Keep your phone on. And Mrs. Bennett? Yes. Your husband was a brave man. He knew what he was risking. Now it's our job to finish what he started. I shook his hand. Thank you, Marcus. He nodded once, then walked out of the coffee shop, disappearing into the December cold. I sat there for a long time, staring at the business card in my hand. Detective Sarah Mitchell, Asheville Police Department, Homicide Division. Marcus became my lifeline. Together we would uncover the truth. But first we needed more evidence, and time was running out. The days between Christmas and New Year blurred together as Marcus and I worked in secret. Every hour mattered. On the morning of December 21st, Marcus called. Meet me at the workshop 6 a.m. before your sons wake up. I was there at 5:50, the sky still dark, my breath fogging in the cold mountain air. Marcus's truck was already parked on the gravel drive, headlights off. He stepped out as I approached, carrying a duffel bag and a flashlight. Mrs. Bennett. He nodded. You didn't tell anyone you were coming? No one. Good, let's move fast. The workshop sat 50 yards behind the house, a low wooden building Tom had built himself 20 years ago. The door was unlocked. Brandon and Kyle had been in and out over the past few days. Clearing things out, they'd said. But Marcus and I both knew they were looking for evidence to destroy. Inside the workshop smelled like sawdust and oil, familiar and heartbreaking. Tom's tools hung neatly on the pegboard walls. Half-finished furniture sat covered in tarps. The gas heater stood in the corner, silent and cold. Marcus walked straight to it. This is what killed him, he said quietly. He knelt beside the heater, pulling on latex gloves. Carbon monoxide poisoning, colorless, odorless. You don't know you're dying until it's too late. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly freezing. How did Brandon do it? Marcus pulled a small flashlight from his bag and shone it into the heater's exhaust vent. See this? The vent pipe is supposed to carry CO outside, away from the building. But if you block it, he pointed, there, adhesive residue and metal fibers. I leaned closer. Faint streaks of gray dust clung to the inside of the pipe. Steel wool, Marcus said, stuffed into the vent to block airflow, sealed with duct tape. When Tom turned on the heater, the CO had nowhere to go. It filled the room. He would have gotten drowsy, disoriented. Eventually, he'd have collapsed. The whole thing looks like an accident unless you know what to look for. And Brandon removed it, I whispered, after Tom died. Exactly. But he left traces. Marcus pulled out a camera and snapped photos from every angle. This is evidence. We just need to prove Brandon bought the materials. He stood brushing sawdust off his knees. Where did Brandon park when he came here? Over there. I pointed to a patch of gravel near the side door. He's been driving his Audi. Sometimes he leaves it there overnight. Marcus walked over, sweeping his flashlight across the ground. Then he stopped. Bingo. He bent down and picked up a crumpled receipt, half buried in the gravel. He unfolded it carefully, his face grim. Lowe's, Asheville location, December 10th, 2023. Steel wool duct tape work gloves. Paid with a credit card ending in 4829. Brandon's card. I'll confirm it, but yes. Marcus slipped the receipt into an evidence bag. This puts him at the hardware store 7 days before your husband died, buying exactly the materials needed to sabotage a gas heater. I felt dizzy. That's enough, isn't it, to arrest him? Marcus shook his head. It's good, but it's circumstantial. A lawyer could argue Brandon bought those supplies for legitimate repairs. We need forensic proof that Tom died from CO poisoning, not a heart attack, not natural causes. We need an autopsy. But he's already buried. Then we dig him up. The next day, December 22nd, Marcus drove to Lowe's and requested security footage. The manager was cooperative. Marcus still had friends in law enforcement. By late afternoon, we had the video. I watched it on Marcus's laptop in his truck parked behind a Walgreens a mile from my house. The footage was grainy but clear. Date stamped December 10th, 2023, 6:15 p.m. A man in a dark jacket walked down the hardware aisle, selected a package of steel wool, a roll of duct tape, and a pair of work gloves. He paid at the register with a credit card. The camera caught his face. Brandon. I stared at the screen. My son. Buying the tools to kill his father. I'm sorry, Marcus said quietly. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. On December 23rd, Marcus met with Detective Sarah Mitchell. He told me about her the day before, mid-40s, sharp, relentless. She'd worked homicide for 15 years, and Marcus trusted her completely. If anyone can get this case moving, it's Sarah, he'd said. That evening, Marcus called me. Mitchell's on board. She reviewed everything, the video, the recordings, the fraud documents, Tom's USB. She agrees this looks like murder, but she needs cause of death confirmed before she can open an official investigation. What does that mean? Exhumation. She's filing a request with the court tonight. If the judge approves it, they'll dig up Tom's body and perform an autopsy. If the medical examiner finds CO in his blood, we've got them. How long? Judge will rule by the 27th. Exhumation could happen as early as the 28th. 5 days. I could hold out 5 more days. On Christmas Eve, Brandon and Kyle insisted I come to Brandon's house in Charlotte for dinner. I didn't want to go, but Marcus had been clear, play the grieving widow. Let them think they're in control. So I drove 2 hours east past the mountains into the flat Piedmont and knocked on Brandon's door at 6 p.m. Vanessa answered, her smile tight and polished. Martha, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. The house was decorated like a magazine, spread white lights, garlands, a towering tree in the corner. Kyle was already there drinking wine in the living room. Brandon appeared from the kitchen apron on playing the dutiful son. Mom, he hugged me stiffly. Glad you made it. We ate ham and roasted vegetables. They asked if I'd signed the cremation papers yet. I said I was still thinking about it. They asked if I'd reconsidered selling the house. I said maybe after the new year. They exchanged glances, frustrated but not suspicious. I played my part. I was the grieving widow, overwhelmed and indecisive. They believed it. But inside, I was counting the hours until the exhumation. I drove home that night through the dark, empty highways, the mountains rising black against the stars. My hands were steady on the wheel. My mind was clear. Detective Mitchell promised the exhumation would happen by the 28th. Until then, I had to keep pretending. I had to sit across from my sons and smile and nod while they planned how to erase their father. But inside, I was building a case that would destroy them. And I wouldn't stop until justice was done. On December 28th, Tom's body was exhumed. I wasn't there, I couldn't bear to be. But 5 days later, on January 2nd, the truth came crashing down. I'd spent those 5 days in a fog. Ruth brought me groceries. Marcus called every evening to check in. Brandon and Kyle left voicemails I didn't return. I told them I had a cold, that I needed rest. They sounded skeptical, but didn't push. I knew what was coming. I just didn't know how much it would hurt. On the morning of January 2nd, Detective Sarah Mitchell called. Mrs. Bennett, can you meet me at Mission Hospital? We have the autopsy results. Marcus is on his way. My hand shook as I drove downtown. Mission Hospital sat on a hill overlooking Asheville, a sprawling complex of brick buildings and glass. I'd been there a dozen times over the years, when Brandon broke his arm at 12, when Kyle had his appendix out, when Tom accompanied me for my annual checkups. Now I was walking through those doors to learn how my husband had died. Marcus met me in the lobby. His face was grim. You ready? He asked. I nodded. I wasn't. Detective Mitchell waited for us on the 3rd floor outside the medical examiner's office. She was younger than I'd imagined, maybe 45, with short dark hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She shook my hand firmly. Mrs. Bennett, thank you for coming. This won't be easy. I understand. She led us into a small conference room. A man in a white coat stood by the window reviewing a file. He turned as we entered. This is Dr. Alan Webster, Mitchell said. Forensic pathologist with the North Carolina Medical Examiner's Office. He performed the autopsy. Dr. Webster was maybe 55 with graying temples and the kind of calm, measured demeanor you'd want in someone who spent their days examining the dead. He nodded to me, his expression sympathetic but professional. Mrs. Bennett, I'm very sorry for your loss. Thank you. We sat. Dr. Webster opened the file, but he didn't look at it. He looked at me. I'll get straight to the point, he said. Your husband did not die of natural causes. He died of carbon monoxide poisoning. The room tilted. I heard Marcus shift beside me, but I couldn't move. The CO level in his blood was 58%. Dr. Webster continued. Anything above 50% is typically fatal. At that concentration, loss of consciousness occurs within minutes. Death follows shortly after. He pulled out a photograph, a close-up of Tom's hand. The skin was an unnatural pinkish red. "This is called cherry red lividity," Dr. Webster explained. "It's one of the hallmark signs of CO poisoning. The hemoglobin in the blood binds with carbon monoxide instead of oxygen, creating this distinctive color. It doesn't fade even after death." I stared at the photograph. That was why Brandon had insisted on heavy makeup. That was why he'd wanted the casket closed. He'd known. "I also examined your husband's cardiovascular system," Dr. Webster said. "No evidence of heart disease, no blockages, no aneurysms. He was in good health for a man his age. There's no natural explanation for his death." "When did he die?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Based on lividity and rigor mortis, I estimate time of death between 5 and 6 a.m. on December 17th, the morning of the funeral. While I was sleeping, Tom had been dying 50 yards away in his workshop." "What about the initial death certificate?" Marcus asked. "Dr. Henderson ruled it a heart attack." Dr. Webster's expression darkened. "That was negligent. Dr. Henderson signed the certificate without performing a proper examination. He relied on statements from the family, specifically Brandon Bennett, who claimed his father had a history of heart problems. Combined with the cosmetics applied at the funeral home, the CO poisoning signs were obscured." "But you found them," Detective Mitchell said. "I did." Dr. Webster closed the file. "There's no question, Detective. This was homicide." Mitchell leaned forward, her hands folded on the table. "Mrs. Bennett, this changes everything. I'm officially opening a homicide investigation into your husband's death. We'll be interviewing Brandon and Kyle Bennett within the next 48 hours. Do you have enough to arrest them?" I asked. "Not yet," Mitchell admitted. "The autopsy proves cause of death, and Marcus has given me the evidence of sabotage, the heater, the receipts, the Lowe's footage. But we need to establish clear premeditation and motive. I'll be working with the district attorney's office to build the case." Marcus spoke quietly. "It's coming together, Martha. We're close." I nodded, but I felt hollow. Tom had died gasping for air in the workshop he loved, killed by the son he'd tried to save. "One more thing," Dr. Webster said. "The cosmetics used at the funeral, they were applied heavily, almost excessively. Someone wanted to hide the lividity. That's unusual." "Brandon requested it," I said. "He told the funeral director to make Tom look peaceful and rosy." Mitchell made a note. "That's consciousness of guilt. We'll use it." That afternoon, my phone rang. Brandon. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello?" "Mom." His voice was tight, controlled. "I just got a call from the Asheville police. They want to interview me and Kyle. Something about an autopsy." I kept my voice steady. "Yes, they exhumed your father's body." Silence. Then, "Why the hell would they do that?" "It's routine, Brandon. When there's no clear cause of death, sometimes they—" "There was a clear cause. Heart attack. The doctor said so. Apparently there were some questions." "What kind of questions?" "I don't know. The detective didn't give me details." Another silence. I could hear him breathing fast and shallow. "Did you ask them to do this?" he demanded. "No, they did it on their own." "Bullshit." "Brandon, I have to go." He hung up. 10 minutes later, Kyle called. His voice was panicked, almost pleading. "Mom, what's going on?" "The police want to talk to us. Brandon's freaking out. Did you tell them something?" "I didn't tell them anything, Kyle." "Then why are they investigating?" "I don't know." Another lie. "Maybe it's just procedure." "This is insane. Dad died of a heart attack. Everyone knows that." "Then you have nothing to worry about," I said gently. He didn't answer. I heard him breathing uneven and ragged. "Kyle, are you all right?" "I have to go." He hung up. That night, I sat in Tom's chair by the window, staring out at the dark mountains. The house was silent. Ruth had offered to stay, but I'd sent her home. I needed to be alone. Dr. Webster's words echoed in my mind. 58% CO, cherry red lividity, homicide. Tom had died slowly, drowning in poison he couldn't see or smell. And Brandon had stood in this house days later and demanded I sign cremation papers. I thought about the times I'd held Brandon as a baby, the way he used to curl into my lap and fall asleep. I thought about Kyle learning to ride a bike, his laughter echoing through the yard. They were my sons. I'd loved them all their lives. And now I was going to destroy them. The autopsy changed everything. Detective Mitchell scheduled interviews with Brandon and Kyle, and somewhere a witness I didn't know existed was about to become the key to everything. On January 5th, Ruth called me at 7 in the morning. Her voice was shaking. "Martha, you need to come over, now. I found something about Mr. Grayson." Mr. Grayson. I was still half asleep, fumbling for my glasses. "Ruth, what?" "Just come, please." 20 minutes later, I was standing in Ruth's kitchen, my coat still buttoned while she poured coffee. Neither of us would drink. "I went to see Linda yesterday," Ruth said. Linda was Mr. Grayson's daughter, a woman in her early 50s who lived in Charlotte and only visited her father on weekends. "She's cleaning out his house, putting it on the market. She asked if I wanted anything you know as a keepsake. Albert and I were neighbors for 20 years. I nodded. Mr. Albert Grayson had lived 3 doors down from me for as long as I could remember. A quiet man, a widower, a Korean War veteran with a limp and a kind smile. I'd spoken to him a handful of times over the years, polite conversations about the weather, the dogwoods, the traffic on Macon Avenue. He died the same night as Tom. I didn't think much of it at the time," Ruth continued. "The police said he fell down the stairs. He was 77, living alone. These things happen. But..." Ruth pulled a small leather-bound notebook from her purse and set it on the table. "I found this on his kitchen counter, his journal. He wrote in it every morning just little notes about his day, appointments, thoughts. Linda said he'd been keeping journals since he came back from Korea." I stared at the notebook. "Ruth, what does this have to do with..." "Read the last entry." She opened it to the final page. The handwriting was shaky but legible, dated December 17th, 2023, the day Tom died, the day Mr. Grayson died. I read aloud, my voice barely a whisper. December 17th, 2023, 4:30 a.m. Couldn't sleep again. Made chamomile tea. Sat by the window watching the darkness. Earlier tonight, must have been around midnight, I heard a car door slam. Looked out and saw Brandon's truck parked at Tom's workshop. Strange. He never comes this late. Tom's truck wasn't there yet. I dozed off in the chair. Woke again at 4:30 a.m. Made more tea. Looked out the window again. Brandon's truck is gone now, but Tom's workshop light is on. Tom must have arrived early to work. But why was Brandon there so late last night? Something feels wrong. We'll call Martha this morning to check if everything's okay. The notebook slipped from my hands. Brandon had been at the workshop around midnight hours before Tom died, and Mr. Grayson had seen him. "Ruth," I breathed. "Oh my God." "Linda said her father had terrible insomnia," Ruth said quietly. "He'd been battling it for years. He'd wake up at 3 or 4 every morning and couldn't fall back asleep. So he'd make tea and sit by the kitchen window, watching the sunrise. That window faces Tom's workshop." I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. "Martha," Ruth said, her voice urgent now. "Albert Grayson died that same night. The police said he fell down the stairs around 9 p.m., but Kyle was the one who found him. Kyle called 911. "Kyle," I repeated. "What if it wasn't an accident?" I called Marcus immediately. He arrived within the hour, took one look at the journal, and called Detective Mitchell. By January 8th, Mitchell had reopened Mr. Grayson's case as a suspected homicide. The evidence came together fast. Phone records showed Kyle's cell phone had pinged near Mr. Grayson's house from 8:45 to 9:15 p.m. on December 17th, right around the time of the fall. Kyle had turned off his location services 30 minutes earlier at 8:15 p.m., but the phone still connected to nearby cell towers. Traffic cameras caught Kyle's car entering Grayson's neighborhood at 8:42 p.m. and leaving at 9:18 p.m., 1 minute before the 911 call came in. And then there was the forensics report. The medical examiner had originally ruled Grayson's death accidental, but when Detective Mitchell requested a second examination, the findings changed. There were bruises on Grayson's shoulders and back bruises with distinct finger-shaped marks. The angle of the fall didn't match someone who'd simply tripped. Someone had pushed him, hard, from behind. Marcus explained it to me in his truck parked outside my house so Brandon and Kyle wouldn't see us together. "Grayson's journal is the breakthrough," Marcus said, opening the photocopy on his lap. "Look at the entry carefully. He heard Brandon arrive around midnight on December 16th, couldn't sleep, was sitting by his window, saw the truck, thought it was strange. Then he dozed off in his chair. When he woke at 4:30 a.m., he looked out again. Brandon's truck was gone by then, but Tom's workshop light was on. So he didn't see Brandon at 4:30? I asked, confused. No, but he saw him around midnight, and that matches our surveillance footage perfectly. Brandon's vehicle arrived at the workshop at 11:42 p.m. and left at 12:18 a.m. Grayson's journal corroborates it. He saw Brandon there in the middle of the night hours before Tom died. Marcus tapped the journal. This is what sealed Brandon's fate. An elderly insomniac sitting by his window watching the neighborhood. He saw something he wasn't supposed to see. And when he mentioned it to his daughter, said he was going to call you to check if everything was okay, Brandon found out. That's when he panicked and sent Kyle to kill him, I whispered. Exactly. Grayson was the only witness who could place Brandon at the scene in the critical window. Brandon knew Grayson was an early riser that everyone in the neighborhood knew about his insomnia. He couldn't risk Grayson talking to you or the police, so he called Kyle and told him to handle it. Grayson saw Brandon at the workshop that morning, Marcus said. Brandon knew Grayson was an early riser everyone in the neighborhood knew, so Brandon panicked. He called Kyle and told him to handle it. Handle it, I repeated numbly. Kyle went to Grayson's house that night. Probably made up some excuse looking for tools, asking about Tom. Grayson let him in. They talked, and then Kyle pushed him down the stairs. I felt sick. How do you know Kyle did it? What if it was Brandon? Because Kyle called 911, Marcus said, and because of this. He handed me a printout recovered text messages between Brandon and Kyle sent the evening of December 17th, 7:30 p.m. Brandon, old man next door, saw me this morning. 7:45 p.m. Kyle. Are you sure? Maybe he didn't see anything. 7:50 p.m. Brandon. We can't take that risk. He lives alone. His daughter only visits weekends. If he tells police tomorrow, we're done. You have to do this. 8 p.m. Kyle. Why me? You did everything else. 8:05 p.m. Brandon. Because I can't be seen near there again. I'm with Vanessa and her family tonight. Alibi. You don't have one. Just make it look like he fell. He's 77. No one will question it. 8:15 p.m. Kyle. Okay, I'll handle it. 9:30 p.m. Brandon, is it done? 9:35 p.m. Kyle, yes. Accident. No witnesses. I read the messages 3 times. My hands were shaking so badly the paper crumpled. Kyle had killed Mr. Grayson, on Brandon's orders, to cover up Tom's murder. They thought they'd deleted these, Marcus said quietly, but the phone company keeps records. Mitchell got a warrant. I couldn't speak. I could only stare at the words. No witnesses. But there had been a witness. Mr. Albert Grayson, a 77-year-old veteran with insomnia who liked to sit by his window and watch the sunrise. A man who'd served his country, raised a daughter, lived a quiet, honest life. And my son had murdered him. Martha. Marcus's voice was gentle. I know this is hard, but we have them now. 2 murders, premeditation, conspiracy. Detective Mitchell is filing for arrest warrants. It'll happen soon. I looked up at him, my vision blurred with tears. Mr. Grayson was going to warn me. He was going to call me the next day, and they killed him for it. I know. He didn't deserve this. No, Marcus said. He didn't. That night, I stood at my kitchen window, staring out at the mountains. Somewhere 3 doors down, Linda Grayson was packing up her father's house, sorting through a lifetime of memories. She didn't know yet that her father had been murdered. Detective Mitchell would tell her soon. I thought about Mr. Grayson sitting by his window, sipping chamomile tea, watching Brandon's car in the pre-dawn dark. He'd been worried. He'd written it down. He'd planned to call me. And for that, he'd died. Detective Mitchell opened a second homicide investigation. And then she found something that would seal my son's fate messages they thought they'd deleted forever. Before I reveal the deleted messages Brandon and Kyle thought were gone forever, messages that prove they planned everything, drop the number 8 in the comments if you're still with me. Quick note, this story contains dramatized elements for educational purposes. If you'd prefer to stop, now's the time. Detective Mitchell worked fast. Within a week, she had Brandon and Kyle's phones, and what she found made my blood run cold. On January 10th, Mitchell summoned both of them to the Asheville Police Department. I wasn't there, Marcus told me about it later, sitting in his truck outside my house, where no one could see us. They showed up with lawyers, Marcus said. Expensive ones. Benjamin Cole for Brandon, some hotshot from Charlotte for Kyle. Mitchell asked them to surrender their phones voluntarily. They refused. So she produced court orders. Could they refuse that? No. Once the judge signs the order, they have to comply. Brandon tried to argue something about privacy rights, but his lawyer shut him down. They handed over the phones and walked out. Didn't answer a single question. What happens now? Marcus's expression was grim. Now we see what they tried to hide. 2 days later, on January 12th, Marcus called me. We've got them. I met him at a Starbucks 20 minutes outside Asheville neutral ground, far from anyone who might recognize me. He slid a folder across the table. Forensic digital analyst recovered deleted text messages from both phones, he said. Brandon and Kyle had been texting each other for months. Financial discussions, arguments about the fraud. But the messages from December 17th... He paused. Martha, these are bad. My hands shook as I opened the folder. The messages were printed in neat columns, time-stamped clinical, but the words were anything but. December 17th, 2023, 7:30 p.m., Brandon Bennett to Kyle Bennett. Old man next door saw me this morning. 7:45 p.m., Kyle Bennett to Brandon Bennett. Are you sure maybe he didn't see anything? 7:50 p.m., Brandon Bennett to Kyle Bennett. We can't take that risk. He lives alone. His daughter only visits weekends. If he tells police tomorrow, we're done. You have to do this. 8 p.m., Kyle Bennett to Brandon Bennett. Why me? You did everything else. 8:05 p.m., Brandon Bennett to Kyle Bennett. Because I can't be seen near there again. I'm with Vanessa and her family tonight alibi. You don't have one. Just make it look like he fell. He's 77. No one will question it. 8:15 p.m., Kyle Bennett to Brandon Bennett. Okay, I'll handle it. 9:30 p.m., Brandon Bennett to Kyle Bennett. Is it done? 9:35 p.m., Kyle Bennett to Brandon Bennett. Yes. Accident, no witnesses. I read them twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. Just make it look like he fell. He's 77. No one will question it. Brandon had ordered Kyle to kill Mr. Grayson, and Kyle had done it. Martha. Marcus's voice was soft. You okay? I wasn't okay. I would never be okay again. They wrote it down, I whispered. They planned it, in writing. They thought they'd deleted it, Marcus said. But phone companies store metadata. The messages were recoverable, and there's more. He pulled out another sheet, Kyle's credit card records. December 17th, 8:35 p.m. Kyle used his credit card at a Shell station 2 blocks from Grayson's house. Security footage confirms it was him bought a bottle of water, paid at the pump. 17 minutes later, his car was recorded entering Grayson Street. I stared at the receipt. Such a small thing. A bottle of water. Proof that Kyle had been there. And this, Marcus said, sliding over a forensic report. Kyle's fingerprints were found on the staircase railing in Grayson's house, not on the banister on the railing at the top of the stairs. Right where someone would grip if they were pushing someone from behind. He didn't wear gloves, I said numbly. No, he panicked, made mistakes. Brandon's the planner, the one who thinks things through. Kyle's the follower, he's sloppy. I thought about Kyle as a little boy following Brandon everywhere. Can I come too? Can I play too? Always seeking his brother's approval. Always doing what Brandon told him to do. And now he'd killed a man because Brandon had ordered it. What did Detective Mitchell say? I asked. She's calling it conspiracy to commit murder, Marcus said. Brandon gave the order. Kyle carried it out. Under North Carolina law, they're both equally culpable. She's building the case now, 2 counts of first-degree murder for Brandon, 1 first-degree and 1 second-degree for Kyle. Second-degree for your husband. The DA thinks Kyle didn't plan Tom's murder, he just went along with it. That makes it second-degree for him, first-degree for Brandon. But both of them are looking at life sentences. Life sentences, my sons, my babies. I closed the folder, Pushed it away, couldn't look at it anymore. When will they be arrested? Soon, Marcus said. Mitchell's coordinating with the DA's office. Maybe a week, 2 at most. On January 15th, Detective Mitchell summoned Brandon and Kyle back to the station. This time, she confronted them with the text messages. Marcus told me what happened. Mitchell had laid the printed messages on the table one by one and asked them to explain. Brandon's lawyer had immediately shut down the interview. My client won't be answering any questions without a formal agreement. Kyle's lawyer had done the same, but their faces had said everything. Brandon had gone pale. Kyle had started crying. They'd known in that moment that it was over. That night I sat in Tom's chair by the window reading the text messages again. Marcus had given me a copy. I don't know why I wanted it. Maybe because I needed to see it in writing. Needed to know it was real. Just make it look like he fell. Brandon's words, cold, calculated, no hesitation. And Kyle's response, okay, I'll handle it. 3 words, and Mr. Grayson had died. I thought about all the times I'd defended Kyle. Sweet Kyle. Sensitive Kyle. The one who sent me birthday cards, who called me every Sunday, who'd cried at his grandfather's funeral. That Kyle had pushed a 77-year-old man down the stairs and then called 911 pretending to be horrified. The text messages, my son's own words, broke something inside me I didn't know could break. I'd known they were guilty. I'd seen the evidence. But seeing it spelled out in their own casual, matter-of-fact language, is it done? Yes. Accident. No witnesses made it undeniable. They weren't just criminals, they were monsters, and I'd raised them. The evidence was piling up. Detective Mitchell had everything she needed for an arrest. But Marcus found something else. Something that proved this wasn't Brandon's first attempt to kill his father. And when I learned what it was, I realized the nightmare had been going on far longer than I'd ever imagined. Marcus called me late on January 18th. He'd found something that made my blood run cold. Martha, he said, his voice tight. Brandon tried to kill Tom once before, 2 years ago. I was sitting in the dark staring out at the mountains. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. What? I'll be there in 10 minutes. Don't go anywhere. He arrived in 8, his truck headlights cutting through the January fog. I met him at the door, and we sat at the kitchen table, the only light coming from the lamp Tom had made from driftwood 30 years ago. Marcus pulled a file from his briefcase. Old police report yellowed at the edges. November 2021, he said. Your husband was admitted to Mission Hospital with carbon monoxide poisoning, moderate exposure. He was found unconscious in his workshop by a neighbor who called 911. I stared at him. Ruth. Ruth Palmer, yes. She'd come over to drop off a casserole. You were visiting your sister in Tennessee that week. She knocked no answer. Heard the heater running in the workshop. Found Tom collapsed on the floor. My mouth went dry. I didn't know. Tom never told me. He probably didn't think it was important, Marcus said gently. The doctors treated him for CO exposure. He recovered fully in 2 days. The police investigated, found the heater had a blocked vent. They ruled it an accidental malfunction. Case closed. He slid the report across the table. I read it slowly, my hands shaking. Patient Thomas Bennett, age 68, found unconscious workshop, 47 Macon Avenue. CO level 42%. Treated and released. Cause faulty gas heater vent obstruction. No foul play suspected. But it wasn't an accident, I whispered. No. Marcus pulled out another document. Look at the maintenance log. 3 days before Tom was poisoned, Brandon came by to fix the heater. Tom mentioned it in passing to the responding officer. Said his son was handy with repairs. Brandon, 3 days before. He was testing it, I said. Exactly. Marcus leaned forward. Brandon sabotaged the heater, waited to see if it would work, but he didn't seal the vent properly, or maybe Tom didn't spend enough time in the workshop that day. Either way, Tom survived. The CO level was high enough to knock him out, but not high enough to kill, and Brandon learned from his mistake. Yes, 2 years later, he got it right. I felt sick. Tom had nearly died in 2021. He'd spent 2 days in the hospital, and I hadn't even been there. Why didn't Tom suspect anything? I asked. Marcus sighed. Because he loved his son, and because there was no reason to suspect. The police said it was an accident. The heater was old. These things happen. Tom probably felt embarrassed, blamed himself for not maintaining the equipment. He certainly didn't think Brandon had tried to kill him. But Brandon knew, I said bitterly. Brandon knew it had worked. Almost. And he spent the next 2 years figuring out how to do it right. Marcus pulled out a third document, a forensic report stamped with yesterday's date. "We recovered Brandon's old laptop," he said. "The one he replaced last year. Digital forensics pulled the browser history. Look at the dates." I scanned the list. October and November 2021, right after the first CO poisoning attempt. The search terms made my stomach turn. October 28th, 2021. Carbon monoxide symptoms. October 30th, 2021. How long does CO poisoning take to kill? November 3rd, 2021. CO poisoning without detection. November 8th, 2021. Gas heater safety mechanisms, how to bypass. November 12th, 2021. Accidental death, carbon monoxide, how common. Brandon had researched it. Methodically. Carefully. He'd learned what had gone wrong the first time, and he'd planned how to fix it. "Jesus," I breathed. Detective Mitchell reviewed this with the DA, Marcus said. It establishes premeditation going back at least 2 years. In North Carolina, that's first-degree murder. Premeditated, deliberate, calculated. The death penalty's off the table. North Carolina has a moratorium, but Brandon's looking at life without parole. "Good," I said. The word came out hard-sharp. "He deserves it." Marcus looked at me for a long moment. "Martha, I know this is hard. These are your sons. They stopped being my sons the day they killed their father." He didn't argue. I stared at the browser history. Brandon had Googled, "How long does CO poisoning take to kill?" 6 days after nearly killing Tom, while Tom was still recovering in the hospital, while I was sitting at his bedside holding his hand thanking God he was alive. Brandon had been at home on his laptop researching how to finish the job. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. Why did he want Tom dead so badly? The money. $200,000. "It's more than that," Marcus said quietly. "Tom was going to prosecute them. That's not just about money, that's about prison. Brandon and Kyle were facing 5 to 10 years for fraud and embezzlement. Brandon couldn't let that happen, so he decided to eliminate the witness. His own father. His own father. I closed my eyes, tried to breathe, failed. "There's one more thing," Marcus said. He hesitated as if weighing how much more I could take. "Tom didn't know about the first attempt, but he did know something was wrong. That's why he hired me 6 months ago. He said he'd started noticing things, Brandon asking about his schedule, about when he worked in the workshop, about the heater. Little things that didn't add up. Tom couldn't prove anything, but he felt it. He knew his sons were dangerous, and he tried to save them anyway," I whispered. "He did." I thought about Tom in that workshop 2 years ago, collapsing as the carbon monoxide filled his lungs. I thought about Ruth finding him calling 911, saving his life. And I thought about Brandon sitting at his laptop Googling ways to make sure it worked the next time. "When will they be arrested?" I asked. "Soon. Mitchell's finalizing the warrants. She wants to make sure everything's airtight, 2 murders, conspiracy, fraud. She's building a case that can't be beaten. Is there anything else we need?" Marcus nodded slowly. "One more piece. Motive. We need to prove why Brandon and Kyle were so desperate for money that they'd kill for it. We need to show the jury that this wasn't just greed, it was self-preservation. How do we do that?" "We find the evidence Tom hid," Marcus said. "The safe deposit box, the one Brandon and Kyle have been looking for. The practice run proved intent, but we needed one more piece proof of why. And it was hidden in a place only Tom knew about." On January 25th, Marcus and I met at First Citizens Bank in downtown Asheville. Tom had left behind one final gift, a metal box, whose existence I never knew about. The morning air was cold, biting through my wool coat as I climbed the granite steps of the bank. Marcus stood waiting near the entrance, his expression somber, a manila folder tucked under his arm. He nodded when he saw me, and together we walked inside past the polished marble columns and the hushed conversations of other customers conducting their business. I felt out of place as though I were trespassing in someone else's life. "Box number 237. Marcus said quietly as we approached the service desk. Tom opened it in October 2023, just after he hired me. He wrote about it in an email, said, "If anything happened to him, I should get a court order and bring you here." The bank manager, a woman in her 50s with wire-rimmed glasses and a kind smile, led us down a narrow corridor to the vault. The steel door swung open with a soft hiss, revealing rows of numbered boxes embedded in the wall. She inserted her master key, then handed Marcus the second key. Together they turned and the small metal door clicked open. Marcus pulled out a rectangular box no larger than a shoebox and set it on the table in the private viewing room. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside were documents, dozens of them arranged in neat stacks with labels in Tom's careful handwriting. I recognized his script immediately, the small, precise letters he used when he was working on something important. My throat tightened. Marcus began lifting each stack, naming them as he went. Forged loan document $150,000 dated March 2018. Fake retirement withdrawal $85,000 October 2020. Beneficiary change to Brandon and Kyle forged in July 2022. He paused, holding up a thicker envelope. And this, a handwriting analysis report. I took the report from him, scanning the first page. The forensic examiner had compared signatures from Tom's will and financial documents with known samples of Brandon's handwriting. The conclusion was printed in bold, greater than 95% probability that signatures attributed to Thomas Bennett were executed by Brandon Michael Bennett. I felt the room tilt. My son, my firstborn, had stolen his father's signature, his identity, his trust. Over $200,000 siphoned away piece by piece over 5 years. "There's more," Marcus said, pulling out another document. "Bank transfer records. Total stolen $235,000. Tom traced every transaction." I stared at the numbers. $150,000 in 2018, $85,000 in 2020. Then the beneficiary change in 2022, cutting me out of Tom's modest retirement fund and naming Brandon and Kyle as sole heirs. Every line represented a betrayal, a deliberate act of theft. At the bottom of the box lay a single letter addressed to William Harper, Esquire, an attorney in downtown Asheville. The date was December 14th, 2023, just 3 days before Tom died. Marcus read it aloud. "Dear Mr. Harper, I am writing to confirm our appointment on December 18th, 2023 at 10 a.m. I have uncovered substantial evidence that my sons Brandon Bennett and Kyle Bennett have committed fraud and embezzlement against me over a period of 5 years, totaling $235,000. I intend to confront them privately on December 16th, offering them one final opportunity to confess and make restitution. If they refuse, I will proceed with criminal charges and a civil lawsuit on December 18th. I have retained private investigator Marcus Reynolds to assist in gathering evidence. All documentation, including forensic handwriting analysis, bank statements, and recorded conversations, will be provided to you at our meeting. Respectfully, Thomas Allen Bennett." My chest ached. Tom had known. He had known for months, maybe longer, and he had carried this weight alone. He had tried to protect me, to shield me from the truth until he could fix it, and they had killed him for it. "There's a USB drive, too," Marcus said, holding up a small black flash drive. "Backup of everything." Tom was meticulous. He wanted to make sure nothing could be destroyed or hidden. I took the USB, turning it over in my palm. It was so small, so ordinary, yet it contained the proof that would send my sons to prison. "Why now?" I whispered. Why did he wait until December to confront them? Marcus leaned back in his chair, his face grim. Because he wanted to give them a chance. Tom believed in redemption. He thought if he confronted them face to face, showed them the evidence, they might confess. But they didn't. They killed him instead. Brandon and Kyle knew about the meeting. Not the details, but they knew Tom was getting close. The recordings we found Brandon's voice on October 14th, saying, "We need to handle the problem with Dad." That was their plan. They knew Tom had scheduled the appointment with William Harper for December 18th. They had to stop him before that date. Detective Mitchell had explained it to us 2 days earlier. Brandon and Kyle stood to gain $1. $4 million from Tom's life insurance policies, accumulated debts forgiven, and access to the house and property. If Tom had gone to the lawyer on December 18th, they would have faced fraud charges, embezzlement prosecution, and prison time. Killing him was their only way out. Marcus closed the box. Detective Mitchell has enough now. The carbon monoxide poisoning the sabotaged heater, the receipts from Lowe's Kyle's phone data near Mr. Grayson's house the night he died, and now this the motive. She's applying for arrest warrants today. I nodded, unable to speak. Tom's voice echoed in my mind the words from his video. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Trust Marcus. He'll finish what I started. Outside, the winter sun broke through the clouds, casting pale light across the bank lobby. Marcus held the door open for me, and we stepped into the cold. They'll be arrested soon, he said quietly. Maybe as early as tomorrow. I pulled my coat tighter and walked toward the parking lot, clutching the USB in my pocket. Justice was coming. February 5th, 2024, the day my sons were arrested for murder. I wasn't there. I couldn't be. But Marcus called me at 7:15 in the morning. Martha, he said quietly, it's done. I sat at the kitchen table, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence that followed his words. Ruth Palmer sat across from me, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. She had stayed the night, refusing to leave me alone. I was grateful for that. Marcus's voice came again, steady and professional. Detective Mitchell executed the warrants at 6 this morning. Brandon was arrested at his house. Kyle was picked up at his apartment in Charlotte. Both are being transported to Buncombe County Detention Center. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. My throat was too tight to speak. The charges are formal now, Marcus continued. Brandon faces first-degree murder for Tom, second-degree murder as an accomplice in Albert Grayson's death fraud, and embezzlement totaling $235,000 and destruction of evidence. Kyle faces second-degree murder as an accomplice in Tom's death, second-degree murder for directly killing Albert Grayson, conspiracy to commit murder and fraud and embezzlement as an accomplice. I closed my eyes. The words felt surreal, like something from a television drama. Not my life. Not my son's. Arraignment is scheduled for 7 tonight, Marcus said. Mitchell expects the judge will deny bail flight risk severity of charges to victims. They'll be held until trial. Thank you, Marcus, I whispered. It was all I could manage. When I hung up, Ruth reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was firm grounding. You did the right thing, she said softly. I didn't answer. I wasn't sure anymore what right meant. By mid-morning, the news had spread. My phone buzzed constantly, texts, voicemails, missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Ruth fielded most of them, her voice sharp and protective. Mrs. Bennett has no comment. Please respect her privacy. At 11, the local news station ran the story. Ruth turned on the television reluctantly, and there it was, a reporter standing outside the Buncombe County Courthouse, her expression grave. Local insurance broker Brandon Bennett and his brother Kyle Bennett were arrested early this morning on charges of murdering their father, Thomas Bennett, and elderly neighbor Albert Grayson. The Asheville community is reeling from the shocking allegations. Both men are being held without bail, pending arraignment tonight. The screen cut to a photo of Tom, his smiling face from our 40th anniversary 2 years ago. Then another photo, Brandon and Kyle at a family Christmas arms around each other, laughing. I looked away. They used that picture, I murmured. The one from 2021. Ruth turned off the television. Don't watch anymore, it'll only hurt. But the damage was done. The images were burned into my mind. Tom's kind eyes, Brandon's easy grin, Kyle's confident posture, the men they had been, or the men I had thought they were. At 1 in the afternoon, my phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Vanessa Crawford, Brandon's wife. I hesitated, then answered. Martha. Vanessa's voice was ragged, trembling. Martha, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. What am I supposed to do? I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Vanessa was 29, pregnant with her second child, and married to a murderer. I couldn't summon anger toward her, only pity. Talk to a lawyer, Vanessa, I said quietly, and tell the truth. I saw things. Brandon staying up late researching things on his computer. He was nervous, but I thought it was work stress. I never imagined. Her voice broke into sobs. I know, I said, but you need to cooperate with the police. If you know anything, tell them. It's the only way to protect yourself and your children. She whispered something I couldn't hear, then hung up. Ruth watched me carefully. You okay? I shook my head. No, but I will be. That evening, Marcus called again. Arraignment just finished. Judge denied bail for both. Brandon's attorney argued for house arrest, cited his family and business ties. Judge wasn't persuaded. Kyle's attorney didn't even try too much evidence. They'll remain in custody until trial. When is the preliminary hearing? I asked. February 20th, 2 weeks from now. You'll need to be there, Martha. The prosecution will present evidence and the defense will cross-examine. It won't be easy. I know. Detective Mitchell wants to meet with you again before the hearing. She's building the timeline, preparing witness testimony. She'll need you to confirm details, Tom's behavior in the weeks before his death, conversations you had, anything Brandon or Kyle said that seemed off. I'll do whatever she needs. Marcus paused. Martha, I want you to be ready. The defense is going to argue accident, mistaken identity, reasonable doubt, anything to create confusion. They'll attack Tom's character, suggest he was paranoid, that the fraud allegations were exaggerated. They'll try to make you doubt yourself. I won't, I said firmly. I know what they did. Good, hold on to that. After we hung up, I sat alone in the living room. Ruth had gone to the guest room to rest, leaving me with my thoughts. The house was too quiet, too empty. Tom's reading chair sat in the corner, his favorite blanket still draped over the armrest. I hadn't moved it since he died. I thought about the day Tom and I brought Brandon home from the hospital, how small he had been, how I had cradled him in my arms and promised to protect him. I thought about Kyle's first steps, his laughter echoing through this same house. Where had it gone wrong? When had love turned to greed and greed to murder? I had lost my husband, and now I had lost my sons, not to death, but to the monsters they had become. Outside, the February sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard. I pulled Tom's blanket around my shoulders and closed my eyes. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for February 20th. Until then, I had 2 weeks to prepare for the hardest thing I'd ever have to do, face my sons in court. The Buncombe County Courthouse felt like a place where families came to die. On February 20th, I walked through its doors for the first time and saw my sons in orange jumpsuits. The building was imposing, all granite and glass with high ceilings that made every sound echo. Ruth Palmer walked beside me, her arm linked through mine, steadying me as we climbed the steps. Marcus Reynolds met us in the lobby, his expression somber. Courtroom 3A, he said quietly. Second floor, Judge Harold Brennan presiding. The prosecutor is Jennifer Morrison, Assistant District Attorney. She's good, Martha. She'll present the evidence methodically. I nodded, unable to speak. My chest felt tight, each breath a struggle. Inside the courtroom, rows of wooden benches stretched toward a raised judge's bench. The state seal of North Carolina hung on the wall behind it, flanked by the American flag and the state flag. A few reporters sat in the back, notebooks open. I recognized one from the local news station. Ruth guided me to the front row, just behind the prosecution table. Marcus sat beside me. I kept my eyes forward, avoiding the defense table where Brandon and Kyle would sit. At 9 o'clock sharp, a bailiff called, "All rise," the Honorable Judge Harold Brennan presiding. Judge Brennan entered a man in his 60s with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He took his seat, adjusted his robe, and nodded to the bailiff. "Bring in the defendants." A side door opened and they came in. Brandon first, then Kyle. They wore orange jumpsuits, their wrists shackled, a deputy on either side. Brandon's face was blank, emotionless, his eyes fixed straight ahead. He didn't look at me. Kyle, however, glanced my way. His eyes were red-rimmed, haunted. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then turned away, his shoulders sagging. I gripped the edge of the bench, my knuckles white. Jennifer Morrison stood, a woman in her early 40s with dark hair pulled into a tight bun and a navy suit. She approached the lectern with confidence. "Your Honor," she began, "the state is here today to demonstrate that sufficient probable cause exists to bind the defendants, Brandon Michael Bennett and Kyle Thomas Bennett, over for trial on charges of first-degree murder, second-degree murder conspiracy to commit murder fraud embezzlement, and destruction of evidence. Judge Brennan nodded. Proceed, Ms. Morrison. Morrison opened a folder and began. On December 17, 2023, at approximately 5:30 a.m., Thomas Allen Bennett was found dead in his woodworking shop at 142 Riverside Drive, Asheville. The initial death certificate, signed by Dr. Robert Henderson, listed the cause of death as cardiac arrest. However, following a petition from the deceased's wife, Martha Bennett, the body was exhumed on December 28, 2023. She paused, letting the words settle. The autopsy conducted by Dr. Alan Webster at Mission Hospital revealed the true cause of death, carbon monoxide poisoning. Mr. Bennett's blood CO level measured 58%, well above the lethal threshold of 50%. Dr. Webster also identified cherry red lividity, a hallmark of CO poisoning, and found no evidence of heart disease blockage or any natural cause of death. Morrison held up a photograph of the sabotaged gas heater. Forensic examination of the gas heater in Mr. Bennett's workshop revealed deliberate tampering. The ventilation system was blocked with steel wool and duct tape, causing CO to accumulate in the enclosed space. Receipts recovered from the defendant, Brandon Bennett's vehicle, show a purchase of steel wool duct tape and latex gloves at Lowe's in Asheville on December 10, 2023 at 6:15 p.m. Security footage confirms the defendant made this purchase. I felt my stomach twist. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. Morrison continued. On December 16, 2023, at approximately 11:45 p.m., the defendant, Brandon Bennett, entered his father's workshop. Surveillance footage from a neighboring property captured his vehicle arriving and departing. Cell tower records place his phone at the location from 11:42 p.m. to 12:18 a.m. During that time, the defendant sabotaged the heater and left the premises, locking the door behind him. She turned a page. The second victim, Albert Grayson, age 77, was found dead on December 17, 2023 at 9:30 p.m. at his residence on Maple Street. Initially ruled an accidental fall, the case was reopened after Mr. Grayson's daughter, Linda Grayson, provided his personal journal. Morrison held up a photocopy of the journal entry enlarged for the jury to see. Mr. Grayson suffered from chronic insomnia. On the night of December 16th into the early morning of December 17th, he was awake sitting by his kitchen window. His journal entry, written at 4:30 a.m. on December 17th, notes that he observed Brandon Bennett's vehicle at Thomas Bennett's workshop around midnight. He found this unusual. Brandon rarely visited his father late at night. Mr. Grayson dozed off, then woke again at 4:30 a.m. and recorded his observations in his journal. She gestured to a display screen showing the surveillance timestamps. Surveillance footage from a neighboring property confirms Mr. Grayson's account. Brandon Bennett's vehicle arrived at the workshop at 11:42 p.m. on December 16th and departed at 12:18 a.m. on December 17th. During that 36-minute window, the defendant sabotaged the gas heater that would kill his father hours later. Mr. Grayson's journal provides independent corroboration of the defendant's presence at the scene. Morrison's voice hardened. Mr. Grayson mentioned his observation to his daughter. He planned to call Mrs. Bennett that morning to check if everything was okay. He never got the chance, because when Brandon Bennett learned that Mr. Grayson had seen his vehicle that night, he ordered his brother Kyle to silence the only witness. Morrison's voice sharpened. Cell tower data places Kyle Bennett's phone near Mr. Grayson's residence from 8:45 p.m. to 9:15 p.m. on December 17th. Traffic camera footage shows Kyle Bennett's vehicle arriving at 8:42 p.m. and leaving at 9:18 p.m., 1 minute before the 911 call reporting Mr. Grayson's death. Autopsy findings revealed defensive wounds on Mr. Grayson's hands and an inconsistent fall angle indicating he was pushed. She held up another document. Text messages recovered from Kyle Bennett's phone include the following exchange with Brandon Bennett on December 17th at 8:10 p.m. "Old man saw you. He's gonna talk." Reply from Brandon. "Handle it tonight." Kyle's response. "How much?" Brandon, $10,000. Do it right." The courtroom was silent. I felt Ruth's hand on my shoulder, squeezing gently. Morrison moved to motive. Forensic accountants traced $235,000 in fraudulent transactions executed by the defendants between 2018 and 2022. These included a forged loan of $150,000 in 2018, a fake retirement withdrawal of $85,000 in 2020, and an unauthorized beneficiary change in 2022. Handwriting analysis confirmed a greater than 95% probability that Thomas Bennett's signatures were forged by Brandon Bennett. She closed the folder. Thomas Bennett discovered the fraud in June 2023. He hired private investigator Marcus Reynolds to gather evidence and scheduled a meeting with attorney William Harper on December 18, 2023, intending to file criminal charges. The defendants knew about this meeting. Audio recordings from October 14, 2023, captured Brandon Bennett stating, "We need to handle the problem with Dad before the 18th. The defendant's motive was clear: avoid prosecution and secure $1.4 million in life insurance payouts. Judge Brennan leaned forward. "Defense your response." Brandon's attorney, a thin man in a gray suit named David Carlisle, stood. "Your Honor, the state's case is entirely circumstantial. There are no eyewitnesses to Mr. Bennett's death. The purchase of hardware supplies is not evidence of murder. It's evidence of a home repair. The text messages are ambiguous and subject to interpretation. We move to dismiss." Kyle's attorney, a younger woman named Angela Martinez, added, "The state has not proven intent beyond speculation. My client's presence near Mr. Grayson's home is not proof of murder. We request dismissal." Judge Brennan removed his glasses, cleaned them deliberately, and put them back on. "The purpose of a preliminary hearing is not to determine guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. It is to determine whether sufficient probable cause exists to proceed to trial. The evidence presented by the state forensic documentary and testimonial meets that threshold. Motion to dismiss is denied. Trial date is set for June 10, 2024. Defendants will remain in custody without bail." The gavel struck. Brandon and Kyle were led away. Brandon still didn't look at me. Kyle turned once, his face crumpling, but a deputy pulled him forward. Outside the courtroom, I stood on the steps, breathing the cold February air. Ruth stayed close, her presence a quiet comfort. A woman approached mid-40s, dark hair, cautious eyes. "Mrs. Bennett." I turned. "My name is Eleanor. I'm here for another case, domestic violence." She hesitated. "I just wanted to say you're doing the right thing. Don't let guilt stop you." Her words struck something deep inside me. "Thank you," I whispered. She nodded and walked away. Marcus joined us. 4 months until trial. The prosecution will prep you for testimony. It won't be easy, Martha. I looked back at the courthouse, its cold stone facade gleaming in the winter sun. "I know," I said, "but I'll be ready." The trial was 4 months away. 4 months to prepare. 4 months to decide if I had the strength to testify against my own sons. The months before the trial were the loneliest of my life. Spring came to Asheville. Dogwood blossoms bloomed, tourists flooded downtown, but I lived in a perpetual winter. March brought preparation. Jennifer Morrison, the assistant district attorney, called me into her office 3 times a week. Her workspace was efficient and spare, a desk stacked with legal pads, case files lining the shelves, a photo of her family on the corner. She was patient but direct. "Martha, the defense will try to shake you," she said during our first session. "They'll question your memory, suggest you're biased, imply Tom was paranoid. You need to stay calm and stick to the facts." We reviewed the evidence methodically. Tom's USB drive, the forged documents, the receipts from Lowe's, the audio recordings, the text messages between Brandon and Kyle. Each piece was a wound reopened. "Tell me about the morning you found Tom," Morrison said. I closed my eyes, forcing myself back to December 17th. I woke up at 6. He wasn't in bed. I went to the workshop and found him slumped in his chair. His skin was pink cherry red, the coroner called it later. I thought it was a heart attack. Did Brandon or Kyle suggest that diagnosis? Brandon did. He arrived within 20 minutes. He said Dad had been complaining about chest pains. He insisted we not call for an autopsy. Morrison made notes. "Good. The defense will argue you misunderstood Brandon's intentions. Stay firm. He manipulated you. We practiced cross-examination for hours. Morrison played the role of defense attorney, firing questions designed to rattle me. Mrs. Bennett, isn't it true you were estranged from your sons for years? No, we had disagreements, but we were not estranged. Isn't it possible you're exaggerating their behavior because you feel guilty for not noticing the fraud? No, the evidence speaks for itself. Mrs. Bennett, your husband was 68 years old. Isn't it possible he simply died of natural causes? The autopsy proved otherwise. Carbon monoxide poisoning. Blood CO level of 58%. By the end of March, I was exhausted but ready. April brought unwanted attention. Reporters began calling first the local Asheville station, then regional outlets, then a producer from a true crime podcast. Marcus Reynolds installed security cameras around my house and screened every call. They want a story, he warned. Don't give them one. Let the trial speak. I declined all interviews. Mid-April, Vanessa came to see me. She arrived on a Thursday afternoon, her face pale and drawn. She was visibly pregnant now, her belly round beneath a loose sweater. Ruth Palmer let her in, and Marcus stayed in the room at my request. Vanessa sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands trembling. Martha, I filed for divorce last week. I nodded but said nothing. I need to tell you something. Her voice cracked. I saw things over the past year. Brandon staying up late on his laptop watching YouTube videos about carbon monoxide. Large cash withdrawals, thousands of dollars. He was nervous, distracted. I asked him what was wrong, and he said it was work stress. She wiped her eyes. I saw the signs, Martha, but I was scared. I didn't want to believe my husband was a monster. I'm so sorry. I stared at her, my chest tight. Part of me wanted to scream at her. You knew and you said nothing, but another part understood. Fear is a powerful silencer. You were afraid, I said quietly. I understand, but you should have come to me sooner. I know, she sobbed. I'll testify. I'll tell the court everything I saw. Brandon's behavior, the withdrawals, the research. I'll do whatever I can to help. Marcus leaned forward. The prosecution will call you as a witness. Your testimony will establish premeditation and Brandon's state of mind in the months before Tom's death. Vanessa nodded, her face crumpling. I just want this to be over. After she left, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the empty chair across from me. Tom should have been there. He should have been the one holding my hand, telling me it would be okay. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. It was from Kyle. The envelope was thin, marked with the Buncombe County Detention Center return address. I opened it with shaking hands. Dear Mom, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if I deserve for you to read this, but I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt Dad. Brandon said it was just a scare tactic that we'd confront him and he'd back down. I didn't know he was going to kill him. I swear I didn't know. Mr. Grayson, that was my fault. I panicked. Brandon told me the old man had seen him at the workshop, that he was going to talk. Brandon said we'd go to prison if anyone found out. I didn't mean to push him. It just happened. I know you'll never forgive me. I don't forgive myself, but I wanted you to know I loved Dad. I loved you. I just got lost somewhere along the way. Kyle. I read the letter 3 times, then folded it and put it in a drawer. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Not yet. In May, I started seeing Dr. Linda Foster, a therapist recommended by Ruth. Her office was warm and quiet, filled with plants and soft light. She let me talk without judgment. I feel like I failed them. I told her during our 3rd session. I raised them. Where did I go wrong? Dr. Foster leaned forward. Martha, you didn't make them commit murder. They made those choices. Your job now is to process your grief and find a way forward. I don't know if I can. You can. You're stronger than you think. By the end of May, I was still exhausted, still grieving, but I was standing. That had to be enough. June 10th arrived like a storm I couldn't outrun. The trial would last 2 weeks, and I would have to relive the worst days of my life in front of strangers. But I would do it. For Tom, for the truth, for justice. June 10th, 2024. The trial began on a humid Monday morning. I sat in the front row, hands folded, and watched 12 strangers decide the fate of my sons. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the back rows, cameras waiting outside for the lunch recess. Ruth Palmer sat beside me, her presence steadying. Marcus Reynolds was seated further back, ready to testify when called. Judge Harold Brennan entered, and we all stood. He took his seat, surveyed the room with a calm, measured gaze, and nodded to the bailiff. "Bring in the jury pool." Jury selection took the entire first day. Potential jurors were questioned one by one. Could they be impartial? Did they know the defendants? Had they followed the case in the media? By late afternoon, 12 jurors and 2 alternates were seated, 8 women, 4 men. Ages ranging from early 30s to late 60s, a retired teacher, a nurse, a contractor, a bank teller. Ordinary people tasked with an extraordinary decision. Brandon and Kyle sat at the defense table, flanked by their attorneys. Brandon wore a dark suit, his expression blank. Kyle looked thinner, his face drawn. He glanced at me once, briefly, before looking away. On Tuesday morning, June 11th, the opening statements began. Jennifer Morrison stood first. She was composed, confident, her voice clear and firm. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a case about greed, betrayal, and cold-blooded murder. Over a period of 5 years, the defendants Brandon Bennett and Kyle Bennett stole $235,000 from their father, Thomas Bennett. They forged his signature, embezzled his retirement funds, and changed his beneficiaries without his knowledge. When Thomas discovered the fraud and planned to confront them and to file criminal charges on December 18th, 2023, they killed him." She paused, letting the words settle. "The evidence will show premeditation. Brandon Bennett researched carbon monoxide poisoning for months. He purchased steel wool duct tape and latex gloves on December 10th, 2023. On the night of December 16th, he entered his father's workshop and sabotaged the gas heater, causing a lethal buildup of carbon monoxide. Thomas Bennett died alone in agony while his son drove home and went to bed." Morrison's gaze swept the jury. But that's not all. When a 77-year-old neighbor, Albert Grayson, witnessed Brandon's vehicle at the workshop that morning and planned to report it, Kyle Bennett was sent to silence him. Mr. Grayson was pushed down his stairs and left to die. 2 murders, 2 innocent men. The evidence will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Brandon and Kyle Bennett are guilty. She sat down. The defense attorney, David Carlisle, rose. He was older, silver-haired, with a calm, almost grandfatherly demeanor. "Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution's case is built on circumstantial evidence and speculation. My clients loved their father. Yes, they made poor financial decisions, borrowing money, mismanaging accounts, but that does not make them murderers. The prosecution will present receipts, phone records, and forensic reports, but they cannot show you a single eyewitness who saw Brandon Bennett sabotage that heater. They cannot prove intent. What they will show you is a grieving family torn apart by tragedy and accusation." He gestured toward Brandon and Kyle. "These men are not killers. They are sons who made mistakes, and mistakes are not crimes." Carlisle sat down and the trial began in earnest. The prosecution called its first witness Detective Sarah Mitchell. She took the stand with quiet authority, her uniform crisp, her answers precise. Morrison led her through the timeline: Tom's death on December 17th, the initial ruling of cardiac arrest, the exhumation on December 28th, the reopened investigation. Detective Mitchell: "What did the autopsy reveal?" "Carbon monoxide poisoning. Blood CO level of 58%. Dr. Webster confirmed the cause of death was asphyxiation due to CO exposure. There was no evidence of heart disease or natural causes." Morrison held up a photograph of the sabotaged heater. "What did forensic examination of the heater reveal?" "The ventilation system was deliberately blocked with steel wool and duct tape. The blockage caused CO to accumulate in the workshop. We recovered receipts from Brandon Bennett's vehicle showing he purchased those exact materials on December 10th, 2023 at 6:15 p.m. at Lowe's in Asheville. Security footage confirmed the purchase." Carlisle cross-examined. "Detective, isn't it possible Mr. Bennett blocked the vent himself, intending to make a repair?" Mitchell didn't flinch. "No. The blockage was concealed and positioned in a way that would not be visible during normal use. It was designed to cause death." Next, Marcus Reynolds testified. He described Tom's hiring him in June 2023, the months of investigation, the discovery of fraud, and Tom's plan to confront Brandon and Kyle. Morrison played Tom's video for the jury. The courtroom fell silent as Tom's voice filled the room. "If you're watching this, it means I'm gone. Brandon and Kyle have been stealing from me for years. I have proof, documents, recordings, everything. I plan to confront them on December 16th and meet my lawyer on December 18th. If I die before that meeting, it wasn't an accident. Trust Marcus Reynolds. He has all the evidence." I closed my eyes, my chest aching. Tom's voice calm, determined, heartbreaking. Dr. Alan Webster took the stand on Thursday. He explained the autopsy in clinical detail, the cherry red lividity, the absence of natural disease, the time of death estimated between 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock a.m. on December 17th. "Dr. Webster, in your professional opinion, was this death accidental?" "No. The CO exposure was sustained and lethal. The blockage of the ventilation system was deliberate. This was homicide." Friday brought financial witnesses. George Henderson, a bank manager, testified about the forged signatures and embezzled funds. A handwriting analyst confirmed with 95% certainty that Brandon had forged Tom's signatures on multiple documents. Carlisle tried to cast doubt. "How can you be 100% certain Brandon tampered with the heater? The forensic evidence is conclusive," Henderson replied. "The signatures do not match Mr. Bennett's known handwriting patterns." By the end of the week, the prosecution's case was airtight. The jury listened intently, taking notes, their faces serious. Brandon remained expressionless. Kyle stared at the table, his hands trembling. I sat through every moment, every testimony, every photograph. Each word was a knife reopening wounds that would never fully heal. The first week ended. Next week, I would take the stand, and I would have to look my sons in the eyes and tell the truth. On June 17th, I took the witness stand. My hands trembled. The bailiff asked, "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" I said, "I do." And I began. Jennifer Morrison approached her expression calm and reassuring. "Mrs. Bennett, please state your name for the record." "Martha Bennett." "How long were you married to Thomas Bennett?" 44 years. My voice cracked slightly. I cleared my throat. "We met in 1979, married in 1980. Tom was a good man, a good father. He loved his family more than anything." Morrison nodded. "Mrs. Bennett, can you describe the morning of December 17th, 2023? I took a breath. "I woke up around 6. Tom wasn't in bed. I went to his workshop and found him slumped in his chair. His skin was pink cherry red, I learned later. I thought it was a heart attack. I called 911. What happened next?" "Brandon arrived within 20 minutes. He said Dad had been complaining about chest pains. He urged me not to request an autopsy. He said it would be expensive and unnecessary. I trusted him." Morrison held up a photograph of Tom. "When did you first suspect something was wrong?" "At the funeral, December 19th. I found a white envelope in my coat pocket. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note from Tom. It said, 'Martha, if you're reading this, it wasn't an accident. Watch the USB. Trust Marcus Reynolds. I love you.' What did you do?" I went home that night and watched the USB. Tom had recorded a video on December 14th, 3 days before he died. He explained that Brandon and Kyle had been stealing from him for years, forging signatures, embezzling his retirement funds. He said he planned to confront them on December 16th and meet with his lawyer on December 18th. Morrison paused. "What was your reaction?" I was devastated, shocked, but I believed him. Tom wasn't paranoid, he was meticulous. He had proof, documents, recordings, everything. "What did you do next?" I contacted Marcus Reynolds, the private investigator Tom had hired. Marcus and I worked together to gather evidence. We discovered the sabotaged heater, the receipts from Lowe's, the text messages between Brandon and Kyle. We learned about Mr. Grayson's murder. Everything Tom had warned me about was true. Morrison leaned forward. "Mrs. Bennett, why didn't you go to the police immediately after watching Tom's video? Because I needed proof. Tom had warned me to trust Marcus, and I did. We worked together to build the case before going to Detective Mitchell. Tom had spent months gathering evidence. I wanted to honor that. Morrison nodded. Can you describe Brandon and Kyle's behavior after the funeral? They pressured me to cremate Tom immediately. They wanted me to sell the house and move to assisted living. Brandon brought me papers to sign documents I didn't understand. When I asked for time, he became impatient. Kyle blocked me from entering Tom's workshop, saying it was dangerous. They kept asking about insurance policies, bank accounts, safe deposit boxes. It felt wrong. Did you sign anything? No. I told them I needed to consult a lawyer. That made them nervous. Morrison stepped back. Mrs. Bennett, do you believe your sons killed their father? I looked at Brandon and Kyle. Brandon stared straight ahead, his face a mask. Kyle's eyes were red, his hands gripping the edge of the table. Yes, I said quietly. The evidence proves it. The carbon monoxide poisoning, the sabotaged heater, the receipts, the recordings, the murder of Mr. Grayson. They killed Tom to cover up their fraud and to collect his life insurance. And they killed Mr. Grayson to silence him. Morrison returned to her seat. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Brennan nodded. Mr. Carlyle, your witness. David Carlyle stood, his expression sympathetic but probing. Mrs. Bennett, I'm sorry for your loss. I know this is difficult. I said nothing. Mrs. Bennett, is it true that you and Tom had marital problems over the years? No. You never argued about money. Every couple argues, but we loved each other. Our marriage was strong. Carlyle paced. Mrs. Bennett, isn't it possible that Tom was paranoid, that he misunderstood innocent financial transactions? No. The fraud was real. The bank records prove it. $235,000 stolen over 5 years. Forged signatures confirmed by a handwriting expert. Tom wasn't paranoid. He was right. Mrs. Bennett, did you ever see Brandon or Kyle at the workshop on the morning of December 17th? No. Then how can you be certain they were there? Because the evidence shows it. Surveillance footage, cell tower data, Mr. Grayson's journal entry. Brandon's vehicle was at the workshop at 4:30 a.m. Mr. Grayson saw it and wrote it down. Carlyle frowned. Mrs. Bennett, isn't it possible you're biased against your sons because you feel guilty for not noticing the fraud earlier? I felt anger rise in my chest. I'm not biased. I'm heartbroken. But I won't let my grief obscure the truth. Tom deserved better. Mr. Grayson deserved better. And I owe it to them to tell the truth. Carlyle tried again. Mrs. Bennett, isn't it possible Tom's death was accidental, that Brandon purchased those supplies for a legitimate repair? No. The heater was deliberately sabotaged. The forensic evidence is conclusive. Brandon researched carbon monoxide poisoning for months. He planned this. Carlyle paused, then nodded. No further questions. I looked at Brandon and Kyle one last time. Brandon's face remained cold, expressionless. Kyle was crying, tears streaming down his face. He mouthed something I couldn't tell if it was, I'm sorry, or please. My heart cracked, but I didn't look away. Judge Brennan said, Mrs. Bennett, you may step down. I stood slowly, my legs shaking. As I walked back to my seat, I felt the weight of every eye in the courtroom. Ruth squeezed my hand as I sat down. Jennifer Morrison leaned over. You did well, Martha. I nodded, unable to speak. Morrison stood. Your Honor, the prosecution calls Vanessa Crawford. Vanessa entered from the back, visibly pregnant, her face pale. She took the stand and Morrison began. Mrs. Crawford, please state your relationship to the defendants. I'm Brandon Bennett's wife, soon to be ex-wife. The courtroom fell silent. The defense was about to face its worst nightmare, a witness from within. I stepped down from the stand. Jennifer Morrison had one more witness, Vanessa, and after that, the defense would try to save my sons. On June 28th, the jury returned after 14 hours of deliberation. The courtroom fell silent as the jury foreperson stood. Have you reached a verdict? Judge Brennan asked. We have, Your Honor. The second week of the trial had been brutal. On June 18th, Vanessa Crawford took the stand. She was visibly pregnant, her hands trembling as she swore the oath. Jennifer Morrison handled her gently. Mrs. Crawford, please describe your husband's behavior in the months before Thomas Bennett's death. Vanessa's voice was barely above a whisper. He was different. Starting around October 2023, he stayed up late on his laptop. I saw him watching YouTube videos about carbon monoxide symptoms, how long it takes to kill, how to avoid detection. I asked him why, and he said it was for a safety training course at work. I believed him. What else did you observe? Large cash withdrawals, thousands of dollars over several months. He said it was for business expenses. He became anxious, distracted. He'd check his phone constantly. The night of December 16th, he left the house around 11:30 p.m. He said he had to check on a client's property. He came back around 12:30 a.m. I didn't think anything of it until later. Morrison showed her bank statements. Do you recognize these withdrawals? Vanessa nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I signed some of those forms. I didn't know what they were for. David Carlisle cross-examined aggressively. Mrs. Crawford, isn't it true you're divorcing Brandon and seeking sole custody of your children? Don't you have a financial motive to testify against him? Vanessa looked him in the eye. I filed for divorce because I'm married to a murderer. I'm testifying because it's the right thing to do. Carlisle tried again. Did you ever see Brandon tamper with a heater? No, but I saw him research how to do it. The defense called its own witnesses friends of Brandon and Kyle, who testified they were good men, devoted sons, hardworking and honest. But their words rang hollow against the mountain of forensic evidence recordings and financial documents. On June 27th, closing arguments began. Jennifer Morrison stood before the jury, her voice steady and firm. Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence in this case is overwhelming. Brandon Bennett planned his father's murder for months. He researched carbon monoxide poisoning, purchased the materials, sabotaged the heater, and left Thomas Bennett to die. When Albert Grayson witnessed Brandon's vehicle at the workshop and threatened to expose him, Kyle Bennett was sent to silence him. 2 innocent men are dead because of greed. The defendants stole $235,000, and when they were about to be caught, they committed murder to cover it up. The evidence proves guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. I ask you to hold them accountable. David Carlisle countered. The prosecution's case is built on circumstantial evidence. Yes, Brandon purchased hardware supplies, but that's not proof of murder. Yes, Kyle was near Mr. Grayson's house, but that's not proof he pushed him. The prosecution wants you to believe the worst about these men because it fits their narrative. But reasonable doubt exists. You must acquit. The jury was dismissed at 4 p.m. on June 27th to begin deliberations. They deliberated through the evening overnight and into the morning of June 28th. 14 hours total. I waited with Ruth and Marcus in a small room adjacent to the courtroom. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every moment of the trial in my mind, the evidence, the testimony, the faces of the jurors as they took notes. At 10:15 a.m. on June 28th, the bailiff knocked on the door. The jury has reached a verdict. My heart stopped. We filed back into the courtroom. The gallery was packed. Reporters, spectators, members of the community who had followed the case. Brandon and Kyle were led in, both wearing the same dark suits they had worn throughout the trial. Brandon's face was emotionless. Kyle looked pale, his eyes red and swollen. Judge Brennan entered. All rise. We stood. Please be seated, the judge said. Bring in the jury. The 12 jurors filed in, their faces somber. None of them looked at Brandon or Kyle. That I knew was a bad sign for the defense. Judge Brennan addressed the foreperson, a woman in her 50s, who had worked as a nurse. Madam Foreperson, has the jury reached a verdict? We have your honor. The bailiff took the verdict forms and handed them to the judge. Judge Brennan reviewed them silently, then passed them back. The defendant will rise, Judge Brennan said. Brandon and Kyle stood flanked by their attorneys. In the matter of the state of North Carolina versus Brandon Michael Bennett on the charge of first-degree murder of Thomas Allen Bennett, how do you find? The foreperson's voice was clear. Guilty. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I felt Ruth's hand grip mine. On the charge of second-degree murder as an accomplice in the death of Albert Grayson, how do you find? Guilty. On the charges of fraud and embezzlement, how do you find? Guilty on all counts. Judge Brennan turned to Kyle. In the matter of the state of North Carolina versus Kyle Thomas Bennett on the charge of second-degree murder as an accomplice in the death of Thomas Allen Bennett, How do you find guilty? On the charge of second-degree murder in the death of Albert Grayson, how do you find guilty? On the charges of conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and embezzlement, how do you find guilty on all counts? Kyle's knees buckled. His attorney steadied him. Brandon remained still, his face a mask. Judge Brennan announced sentencing would occur the following week. He dismissed the jury with thanks. On July 5th, Brandon was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 30 years. Kyle received 25 years to life with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Brandon showed no reaction. Kyle sobbed openly, whispering, "I'm sorry, Mom, I'm so sorry." I sat motionless. Ruth held my hand. Marcus stood beside me, silent and steady. Justice had been served, but the cost was everything I had. I stepped out of the courthouse into the June heat. Marcus drove me home. The house was empty, silent. Tom's chair sat in the corner, his blanket still draped over it. I sat down and stared at the walls. A week later, I received a phone call that would change everything again. 1 week after the verdict, I received a call from Buncombe County Detention Center. Mrs. Bennett, the officer said, "Your son Kyle is requesting a visit. He says it's urgent." I hadn't planned to see either of them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But something in the officer's tone made me pause. When I asked, "Tomorrow if you're available, July 5th, 10 a.m." I hesitated, then agreed. The detention center was cold and sterile, all concrete and fluorescent lights. A guard led me through a series of locked doors to a small visitation room divided by a thick glass partition. I sat down, my hands folded on the metal counter, and waited. Kyle was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his wrists shackled. He looked thinner than I remembered, his face pale and gaunt, his eyes red and swollen. He sat down, slowly picked up the phone on his side of the glass, and waited for me to do the same. I lifted the receiver. "Mom," his voice broke immediately. Tears streamed down his face. "Mom, I'm so sorry." I said nothing. I didn't know what to say. "I didn't want to kill Dad," he sobbed. "I swear I didn't. Brandon, he threatened me. He said if I didn't help, he'd pin the whole fraud on me. He said I'd go to prison alone. I was scared, Mom. I was so scared." I stared at him through the glass. My son. My baby. The boy I'd rocked to sleep, taught to ride a bike, cheered for at every baseball game. Now a convicted murderer. The morning Dad died. Kyle continued, his voice shaking. "I went to the workshop at 6 a.m. after Brandon left. I wanted to warn Dad, but it was too late. He was already gone. I panicked. I ran. I should have called 911. I should have told the truth, but I was a coward." He wiped his face with his sleeve. "Mr. Grayson Brandon made me do it. He said if I didn't, we'd both go to prison. I didn't want to kill anyone, Mom, but I did. And I'll never forgive myself." I felt my chest tighten. Part of me wanted to scream at him. Part of me wanted to reach through the glass and hold him. "I talked to my lawyer," Kyle said. "I'm leaving everything I have to you for Dad's foundation. It's not much, about $200,000 from the advance on Dad's estate before the trial. The prosecutor, Jennifer Morrison, says the court will allow it. It's all I can do." He slid a handwritten letter under the glass partition. "I wrote this for you. Please read it." I picked up the letter but didn't open it. Not yet. Kyle's voice dropped to a whisper. "Mom, I love you. I love Dad. I'm so sorry." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I spoke, my voice steady despite the tears running down my face. "Kyle, you made choices, and now you have to live with them. I forgive you, but I can't forget." He nodded, sobbing. "I know." The guard tapped his shoulder. Time was up. Kyle stood still, crying, and was led away. I sat alone in the visitation room holding the letter and finally let myself cry. 3 days later, on July 10th, I received another call. "Mrs. Bennett, this is Warden Harris at Buncombe County Detention Center. I'm sorry to inform you that your son Kyle Thomas Bennett was found deceased in his cell this morning. Preliminary findings indicate suicide by hanging. He left 2 letters, one for you and one for the court." The phone slipped from my hand. Ruth was with me when I opened the letters. The first was addressed to me. "Dear Mom, I can't live with what I've done. Every time I close my eyes, I see Dad's face. I see Mr. Grayson falling. I hear their voices. I can't escape it. I know I deserve to be in prison. I deserve every year of that sentence. But I can't do it, Mom. I'm not strong enough. I talked to my lawyer before this. I'm leaving everything to you, $200,000 from Dad's probate advance. The court approved it before the trial for legal fees, but I never used it. It's yours now. Use it for the Tom Bennett Foundation. Maybe it can save someone else. Maybe it can do some good. I love you, Mom. I love Dad. I'm so sorry for everything. Kyle. The second letter was a legal will notarized by the detention center, transferring the full $200. 000 to me for the establishment of the Tom Bennett Foundation for victims of domestic violence and financial abuse. Jennifer Morrison called the next day. Martha, I'm so sorry. The will is legally valid. The funds will be transferred to you by the end of August. Kyle worked with a public defender to make sure everything was in order. I thanked her and hung up. I buried Kyle beside Tom on July 15th in a quiet cemetery on the outskirts of Asheville. The service was small. Ruth Marcus, a few neighbors, Vanessa and her children. Brandon refused to attend. He sent no message, no flowers, nothing. I stood at the graveside staring at the two headstones side by side. Thomas Allen Bennett, 1955 to 2023. Beloved husband and father. Kyle Thomas Bennett, 1985 to 2024, or I had lost my husband. I had lost both my sons, one to murder, one to suicide. The weight of it was unbearable. But Kyle's final act, his gift, his apology, his redemption gave me something to hold on to, a way forward. In August, the $200,000 was deposited into an account I opened for the Tom Bennett Foundation. Marcus helped me file the paperwork. Ruth helped me plan the mission to support victims of fraud, elder abuse, and domestic violence. People like Tom, people like Mr. Grayson. Kyle had found redemption in death. I only wished he'd found it in life. I stood in Tom's workshop one evening, running my hand over his workbench. The tools were still arranged the way he'd left them. The smell of wood and varnish lingered. I'm going to make this right, Tom, I whispered. For you, for Kyle, for all of them. I buried Kyle beside Tom. Brandon refused to attend the funeral, and I began building something from the ashes, a foundation to honor both of them. 1 year has passed since the trial. I'm 67 now. My hair has more silver streaks. My hands sometimes tremble when I'm tired, but my purpose has never been clearer. The Tom Bennett Foundation was established in August 2024 with the $200,000 Kyle left behind. Our headquarters sits in a small office space on Lexington Avenue in downtown Asheville, just 3 blocks from the courthouse, where justice was served. Marcus Reynolds serves as executive director. Ruth Palmer sits on the board. I am the founder and chairperson. In 1 year, we have helped 52 families victims of domestic violence, elder financial abuse, and fraud. We've successfully closed 18 cases. We've referred 34 individuals to law enforcement for investigation of financial exploitation. We've provided emergency financial assistance to 11 families who had nowhere else to turn. Our initial endowment of $200,000 has grown to $320,000, thanks to donations from across North Carolina. Local businesses, church communities, and individuals who heard our story have contributed. We've begun training private investigators in detecting elder abuse. Our first cohort of 12 graduates completed the program in July. We've held educational seminars for 28 attorneys on recognizing the warning signs of financial coercion. A regional documentary filmmaker contacted us last month. She wants to tell Tom's story and the Foundation's mission. We're considering it carefully, not for publicity, but because it might help others recognize the warning signs we missed. We're also working with state legislators on proposed elder protection legislation. If passed, it would strengthen penalties for financial exploitation of vulnerable adults and create mandatory reporting requirements for financial institutions. The bill is called the Elder Protection Act, and we're hopeful it will pass in the next legislative session. Tom would be proud. On August 12, 2025, exactly 1 year after we opened our doors, we held a small gathering at the Foundation office. About 75 people attended: donors, volunteers, survivors we've helped, and community advocates. The office was crowded warm with summer heat and packed bodies, but nobody seemed to mind. I stood near the window, looking out at the faces, and spoke from my heart. 1 year ago, I stood in a cemetery and made a promise to my husband and my son. I promised I would turn their tragedy into something meaningful. I promised I wouldn't let their deaths be in vain. My voice wavered, but I continued. This foundation is that promise kept. It's not just about Tom or Kyle. It's about every person who trusted the wrong people. Every elderly parent whose children stole from them. Every widow who signed away her home under pressure. Every victim who was too ashamed or too scared to speak up. We see you. We believe you. And we will fight for you. The room was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Soon everyone joined in. Among those in attendance was Eleanor, the woman I'd met at the courthouse during the preliminary hearing 18 months ago. She approached me after my speech, tears in her eyes. Martha, I wanted to thank you. Your foundation helped my sister 3 months ago when her son-in-law forged her will. You saved her home. You saved her dignity. I hugged her tightly. That's why we do this. The next morning, I drove to the cemetery. Tom and Kyle lie side by side under the shade of an oak tree. I visit them every week now, bringing fresh flowers and quiet words. I knelt beside Tom's headstone, running my fingers over the engraved letters of his name. The foundation is growing, Tom. We've helped 52 families already. Marcus says we're getting calls from across the state. People are starting to understand that elder abuse isn't just physical, it's financial, it's emotional, it's manipulation, disguised as love. You'd be proud of what we're building. I wish you were here to see it. I turned to Kyle's grave. The headstone is simple, just his name and the years of his life. I placed a white rose on the grass. You gave me the means to do this, Kyle. Your final gift is helping people you never met. Maybe that's your redemption. I hope you found peace. I sat there for a long time, listening to the wind move through the trees, feeling the August sun on my face. Brandon remains in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2054 when he is 78 years old. I have not visited him. He has not written to me. For over a year, there has been silence between us. Part of me wonders if he feels remorse, if he lies awake at night thinking about what he did, if he understands the magnitude of his choices. But I can't carry that burden anymore. I've forgiven Kyle. I've forgiven myself for not seeing the warning signs sooner. But Brandon chose his path, and he must walk it alone. Vanessa remarried in May 2025 and lives in Charlotte with her 2 children. We exchange occasional emails. She's trying to build a new life, and I don't begrudge her that. Her children are young, 4 and 2 years old. They'll grow up never knowing their father, and perhaps that's a mercy. I still live in the house Tom and I shared for over 4 decades. The workshop remains largely untouched, though I've started going in there again. His tools hang on the pegboard walls. His unfinished projects sit under tarps. Sometimes I pick up a piece of wood he was shaping and try to imagine what it would have become. A table, a chair, a gift for someone he loved. My garden is in full bloom, roses, azaleas, dogwoods bursting with white and pink blossoms. August in Asheville is humid and warm, but the evenings are still pleasant. I sit on the porch Tom built and watch the sun set behind the Blue Ridge Mountains. The foundation will outlive me. That's the goal. Marcus is only 60 with years of work ahead of him. Ruth, despite being 72, has more energy than people half her age. They'll carry it forward. The families we've helped will carry Tom's name into the future. And maybe someday Kyle's name too, not as a murderer, but as someone who tried in the end to make amends. I've learned something in this past year: grief doesn't end. It changes shape. Some days it's a dull ache I carry in my chest. Other days it's sharp and overwhelming, stealing my breath. But alongside the grief, there's purpose. There's the knowledge that Tom's death and Kyle's final act of redemption means something. Every family we help is a small victory against the darkness that took them from me. Every case we close is proof that truth matters, that justice matters, that love, real love, means holding people accountable, even when it breaks your heart. The foundation is still small, we're still learning, we make mistakes, but we're growing. And every day I wake up knowing that I'm doing what Tom would have wanted me to do. Love, I've learned, is not just about the good times. It's about truth. It's about forgiveness. It's about the things we leave behind. It's about taking the broken pieces of your life and building something that helps others avoid the same fate. The sun sets over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. I stand on my porch, a cup of tea in my hands, and think about everything I've lost and everything I'm building. Tom and Kyle are gone, but their legacy is just beginning. And I know that wherever they are, they're watching, and they understand. This is only the first year. There's so much more work to do. And to you who are listening to this story, let me share one final thought. 5 years after everything collapsed, I often asked myself the same question. Where was God when my world was falling apart? I prayed for my family every night. I asked God to guide my children to protect the people I love to keep us together. Yet tragedy still came. For a long time, I believed those prayers had gone unanswered. But time has a way of revealing truths we cannot see in the middle of pain. God gave each of us free will. My children were given the chance to choose honesty or deception, loyalty or betrayal. Their choices were their own. That was not God abandoning us, that was human weakness. What God did give me was the strength to survive, to face the truth, and to rebuild something meaningful from the ruins of my life. Many grandma stories begin with quiet love and painful loss, yet they also reveal resilience. And many family drama stories remind us that the people closest to us can sometimes test us the most. If there is one lesson I learned, it is this: never ignore the warning signs. Trust your instincts. Love should never require blindness. Too many grandma stories carry regret because the truth was ignored for too long. And too many family drama stories begin the moment someone chooses silence over courage. Today I believe something simple: God does not promise a life without pain, but He gives us the strength to endure it and the wisdom to help others afterward. That belief lives inside so many grandma stories, and even the hardest family drama stories can carry that same lesson. If this story moved you, I'd truly like to hear your thoughts. Please share your perspective in the comments so others can learn from it. If stories like this resonate with you, consider sharing this video and subscribing to the channel so more people can hear these experiences and grow from them. Thank you sincerely for staying with me until the very end. And a gentle reminder, some upcoming stories may include dramatized or fictionalized elements created for educational storytelling. If that kind of content isn't for you, feel free to step away and choose something that better fits what you're looking for.